So welcome everybody. This is Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency Board of Directors meeting. It's about to start. And before I hand it over to Chair Chris Perry, just reminding you a few housekeeping things. All votes will be done via roll call. Other than that, please keep, in general, your mutes on just to ensure a smooth and quiet meeting, and there will be opportunities for public comment throughout the meeting. If you are joining us via computer, please raise your hand. Otherwise, on the phone, press *9. And back to you, Chair Perry.
And there will be a short multiple choice quiz after the meeting. Thank you. Let's get a call to order of the July 22nd, 2021 Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency Board of Directors. We need a roll call.
Sure. Let's start with Director Engfer.
Present.
Director Koenig. Director McPherson. Director Cassidy.
Present.
Director Koopman.
Present.
Director Pollock.
Present.
Director Tillis.
Here.
Director Mayhood. Might be on mute. Director Mayhood.
Here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Smalley.
Here.
Director Stiles.
Here.
And Chair Perry.
I am here also. Okay.
I'm gonna
great.
go to alternates really quick. Director Baskin. Director Brown.
Present.
Director Hutchinson. Director Hayes. Director Lind. Director Henry.
Here, Goofy.
And Director Eckwall.
Director McPherson's here. I don't
Okay,
know.
thank you. Got it. And then Director Brown is today also in voting capacity because we do not have a Director Koenig. So we do have 11 voting members.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
There is none from staff.
Hearing no others, is there any oral communication for matters not on the agenda? We'll open that up to the public also.
I'm checking the hands. I do not see any from the panelists nor from the public.
Okay. So let's go down to the approval of the minutes of the June 24th meeting. Do I have a motion?
Move approval of the June 24th meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, that's Director McPherson, Director Stiles, first and second. Any input from anybody, including the public?
Okay, looking for hands. None on either side.
Okay, then can I get a roll call vote?
Yes, Director Engfer.
Aye.
McPherson.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Koopman.
Aye.
Pollock.
Aye.
Dillis.
Aye.
Mayhood.
Aye.
Smalley.
Yes.
Stiles. Director Stiles. Might be on mute.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Director Brown
I'll abstain as I wasn't in attendance.
and Chair Perry.
Yes.
Passes unanimously with one abstain.
Okay. Let's now, if we go to the groundwater sustainability 3.1, I guess Dave is here to facilitate this, and I'm going to give the rest of it to staff. I will just say up front, I want to thank directors and staff for engaging prior to the meeting on many issues. So things could be sort of teed up for tonight. That really saves us valuable time, and appreciate the hard work from staff and etc. So thank you everybody for being engaged.
All right. Thank you, Chair Perry. After everybody excuse me, I'm dealing a bit with asthma today, so I'm coughing a bit. Perret, if you could please pull up the PowerPoint presentation that I had provided to you. So what I'm going to do here is, as Perret's pulling that up, I'm going to go over just really a couple of foundational and framing items for this evening's conversation. And then also, given the potential complexity of a lot of the information we have to go through tonight, I want to cover in advance the proposed facilitation approach and that I'm going to take, and the decision-making approach that we'll take for you as a board. So with that, you can go ahead. Thank you, Perret. And I don't know if you want, there we go. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this, notwithstanding that it doesn't appear that we have terribly many members of the public here tonight, I just want to reiterate, since this is really yet another milestone for you as a board, and notwithstanding that we've talked about some of these things in the past, I think it's important to remember. And there's a number of things. I'm going to move pretty quickly through this because Georgina has a lengthier presentation that actually touch on some of these items, excuse me, as well. It's important to note and remember as we get into the deliberation tonight, we know that there are definitely opinions by various board members that we're going to go ahead and open up the floor on, and we're going to be taking both some straw polls and ultimately a final action on regarding the potential release of the draft GSP to the public. It's important to remember that, so we're going to talk a bit about what a GSP is and is not. We're going to talk about the proposed schedule, so you can again be reminded of where we are in the timeline, purpose of this agenda item, and then the facilitation approach. Next slide, please. So just to remember the statutory intent, the GSP is a policy level document. We know that. We know that it is not a project analysis impact disclosure document, such as a NEPA document or a CEQA document, because it does not require the same levels of input or conversation or response by a lead agency that any CEQA or NEPA type document would do about a discretionary action that you as a public agency would take. That's by statutory intent and by statutory design. We know that the GSP is also not a project implementation document because, as is stated here, we know that we're not looking at construction documents, we're not looking at financing agreements. It's a policy level document. It provides a roadmap that's going to lay out and essentially communicate to a broader public and yes, to a regulatory entity, which is DWR, your goals and intentions on how to achieve and maintain sustainability. And embedded in that, again, from a statutory intent, is that GSPs are fundamentally based on, and SGMA is fundamentally based on concepts of adaptive management, meaning that any decisions that you make tonight, any decisions that are made ultimately on what the GSP finally looks like when it is ultimately certified by you and released to DWR, will continue to be subject to evolution and change as per public input, as per annual reviews, and as per the mandatory statutory 5-year reviews. That's just a reminder of sort of what the GSP is and is not, to put it in the context of your deliberations tonight. Next slide, please. I'm going to just talk about this very quickly because Georgina is going to go into more detail, but obviously what we are on right now is on the cusp potentially of depending on how things go this evening, of you approving as a board to release the draft GSP for public review, which is a 60-day review period. As you look at that schedule, the only thing I really want to focus on, and Georgina will go into more detail, is that, to be quite honest, there's not a lot of wiggle room. There's hardly any wiggle room. It's just, it is where the schedule is right now. I don't know of very many boards, GSA boards throughout the state that aren't facing this exact same dynamic, but there just isn't a lot of wiggle room. Next slide, please. So from a facilitation approach for tonight, in a minute, I'm going to hand things over to Georgina, and I just want to go through this. This is a fairly sequential list of steps. I'm going to hand it over to Georgina, consultant, and Georgina is going to review the agenda packet staff report that you all already have. And in that staff report, as you know, was an emphasis on, in particular, 3 key focus topics that that Georgina and her team focused in on based upon the range of feedback that had been provided by you, the board members, and that they worked on to answer and hopefully resolve. So Georgina is going to cover that first, and then she's going to go into a presentation that she's got in which she's going to really focus on these key GSP revisions that were made as per particular written input that was provided and your comments from the June board meeting, which I apologize that I couldn't have attended. After that, we're then going to have a facilitated discussion. So then we're going to go into that kind of fairly standard procedure that I've done with you many times before, which is I'll help to sort of shepherd the conversation. And in particular, we want to focus first on those 3 focus topics, not to the exclusion of any other topics or any other chapters, but just to sort of do this sequentially so we're not sort of hopping all over the place. So we're going to focus first on those 3 topics, and we're going to see again where the consultant team landed in their attempts to resolve concerns that were raised. And then we're going to do facilitated discussion and facilitated straw poll on those 3 topics first, just so we can see, have they met a meaningful conclusion for you all, an acceptable conclusion to resolve them. So we have a sense of where you're at on those 3 topics. Then we are going to go back and start basically at the top of the GSP document. We're not going to literally go page by page of all 450 pages, but we are going to go chapter by chapter. And I'm going to say, so we're going to go all the way back to chapter 1, and I'm going to call the question, basically say, are there other topics, are there other items that any board members wish to address in chapter 1? And then we'll open up the floor and see where we're at. And then we'll do the same thing for chapter 2 and all the way through the rest of the chapters after we've just done those first 3 focus topics. So the point being, nothing is going to get left uncovered, but we're not going to hop around. We're going to do the first 3 items first and then go back to the top. The reason for that is that I want to make sure that by the end of this conversation tonight, we have exhausted all the feedback that you need to have as board members, so that we can then get public input to be given to you all on a pending action, and then you'll actually have your formal action, which is going to be to vote to approve or not releasing the public draft for a 60-day review period that would be targeted to start tomorrow. So really all the pre-work up to that final point is to basically be straw polling all along the way and assess where we're at, so that we know when we call the question, are we there, are we not, or are there things that should have already been resolved before we call the question. And that's just to make sure that that final calling of the question is efficient, and we know if there's something to be worked out, we've done it ahead of time. So that is the proposed facilitation approach for this evening. With that, I'm going to ask Perrette to go ahead and close this out, and I'm going to hand things over to Georgina.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Just hold on while I switch things over here. Okay. Here we go. So we've come a long way to this point here. And I want to echo what Chair Perry said about all the input that we've received from directors and staff to get to this point. So Dave has pretty much outlined what I'm going to do, but I'm going to give a little, actually, he pretty much gave the background. So I'll go through this quickly. And then, like he said, there's the 3 key items that we'll go over. And then right at the end, after we've had all our discussion, actually, there is this last bullet on here that's to describe to you the process, that what happens after the GSP is adopted by the board, the final GSP, and then what happens. This is just a little bit extra that you haven't heard of. So you've heard some of the things I'm going to talk about, but some of it you haven't. So like you've heard and you know that the GSP is a roadmap for how the agency will achieve long-term sustainability, and this is groundwater sustainability. And why are we doing this? Because of Sigma, it was regulated that GSPs for non-critically overdrafted high and medium priority basins, and this basin is a medium priority basin, is due January 31st of next year. And so that's the big goal. That's the big target that we're aiming for. We've actually been doing this for 24 meetings, is what I have a record of. July 2019 is when we kicked off GSP development. I know that the board had been meeting before that, getting everything teed off so that we could start the GSP developments, but so that's a long time. And throughout this time, the board has learned a lot about the basin, but more importantly, it has guided all the policy-related aspects of the GSP. And I'm going to reiterate again that the GSP is foremost a policy document, and it's never going to be perfect. You've heard me say that before. DWR talks about it. They don't expect there to be a perfect GSP, and the GSP will be improved over time. So you have all seen the different sections and appendices that comprise the GSP. And at the last meeting in June, you all shared any of your substantive comments that you had, and we had a robust discussion about that. And we also have received a lot of, from different directors, comments in writing, and those we have addressed either by revising the GSP or providing some kind of response in a track change document to say why we didn't include it, or providing some other explanation. So that can be requested, and some of the board, the directors have already requested some of those red lines versions. So we're tight here, and here we are at the blue highlighted area in July. We need to go out for a 60-day comment period, which would end in September. The September 23rd meeting is when that would end, and the board would hear verbal public comments on the GSP. I mean, they will also have, through the website that's going to be launched soon here, there will be a form that they can fill out all their comments online as well. I think there'll be other options as well, but we'd like them all in one place. And then, if possible, they can come and speak to you if on the issues that they would like to see addressed in the GSP. And at the end of that meeting, then formally the board would close the public comment period. Then from that point onwards, we have only a month to go through all of those comments and any of the other hopefully minor things from the directors to put everything together, try and understand, have responses to these comments. There'll probably be a log so that we know what all the comments are from the public, and then what are we going to do with them. There'll be some log describing that. And we will be able to, in looking at those comments, see if there are any potential policy changes that arise from those comments. And those are particularly important for you to consider and direct us if there needs to be any changes made to the GSP in light of these public comments. So then after that, we really only have probably not even a month until the November meeting, because the November meeting is going to be when Thanksgiving is. So we have to move that forward a week or two. And that meeting hasn't been finalized yet, that date. And on the slide you see November 17th, but that's the kind of latest that it could be probably. So then that in November is when we need to finalize this GSP, because it takes about 2 months to upload everything and add all the data that is required. All the monitoring data has to be uploaded to the Sigma portal. And you've heard me talk about this elements guide with 380 different lines. We have to point exactly in the GSP where this is. I've done it before. It's very time consuming. So that's why we have to give ourselves this time. Because if we don't manage to get the GSP out in time, the state can intervene. Fortunately, I think in the first round of GSPs, no one failed to make that deadline. And this is a very similar deadline, so timeline, shall I say, that we had at Mid County, and that worked out. We squeaked in there, and so the time we have available is pretty tight. Okay. The different sections, I'm sorry, I didn't want that to be animated like that, but I think you're all very aware of these different sections. There's also now an executive summary in there. Section 1 on the introduction, Section 2, the basin plan and setting. Section 3, the sustainable management criteria that also includes the monitoring network. And truly, Section 3 is the part of the GSP that is the most important to DWR. That is the thing that they are judging the GSP on. That's what makes you fail or pass. And we've seen that based off the comments that they've made on the 4 GSPs that have had some decision made on them. The Section 4 is projects and management actions, and then Section 5 is the GSP implementation where the budget is. Okay, so I selected 3 key topics that I heard come out of the meeting last month. There may have been more, but I wanted to focus in on this because I didn't know how long we would go on just discussing these. And like Dave says, we have opportunity as well later on here to talk about any of those other things that were brought up at that meeting. So the 3 things were that there were too many proposed shallow monitoring wells. There were 6 that were being proposed, and we were asked to reassess and come up with what we thought were the minimum number that would still get us a passing GSP. And we've done that, and I'll share those results. Then there was much talk about the budget and that it was too high. So we went back and looked at that, and we'll go over that as well. And then from the private well owner reps, there not being enough mention of them being exempt from metering, and that they would not be regulated by the agency. And so there's a response on that as well. I'm going to dive into the shallow monitoring wells first and explain this map that you see. And I think I'm going to be going through all of these, all 3 first, and then we're going to pause, and then Dave will facilitate the discussion after that point. So these are proposed shallow monitoring wells for the monitoring of interconnected surface water. It's one of the 4 applicable sustainability indicators. And in the eyes of DWR, all 4 are considered of equal weight. There's not one that's more important than the other. They haven't set that. And so we had proposed 6. And what you see here are the circles are the proposed wells. There are open circles that are the actual proposed wells. There are 6 of them on this map, and the letters that you see inside indicate which aquifer it's in. And I'm sure you would recognize Santa Margarita, the L for Lompico, and the M for Monterey. There's 2 filled circles here. Those are 2 existing representative monitoring wells for this indicator. Now, only having two representative monitoring points would be problematic to DWR, which is also partly why we had proposed to having more wells to bolster that collection of representative monitoring points. For example, the chronic lowering of groundwater levels has 14 representative monitoring points. So there is quite a disparity there between those. So, and the different colors that you see, the blue are all the wells that would be monitoring Bean Creek. The purple is Ziante Creek, and the very dark blue here is Newell Creek. And they're also located where there's a lot of private pumping, because we're doing there are wells in areas where there is municipal pumping. So over here where San Lorenzo's pumping, there is one well, and over here and south of Bean Creek is where both San Lorenzo and Scotts Valley are pumping. So yeah, those had some coverage already, but we needed to add some more. Other reasons why we need these wells is that we're hoping to understand those interactions between groundwater and surface water better, and to use that data, the measured groundwater levels that we get in those wells, to improve the groundwater model, how it simulates that interaction between surface water and groundwater. So we had to look at all of these again, and there is one well that was proposed in this area here, and it turns out that Mount Herman has a test well that is just like an open well, it isn't equipped with anything. It's just standing in an open field, and it's right pretty much where we would like a new well to go. So they very kindly have allowed that to become the monitoring well, and they will take on monitoring of that themselves. And it will have a data logger in it like all the other wells, and we will show them how to collect that data. So that one is one of the 6 that we won't drill. Then there is, we looked a little further, and there is a Monterey Formation monitoring well that is fairly close to another Santa Margarita well, but it's in an area where the Monterey Formation outcrops or is exposed in the creek bed. And this is a place where we believe that there is a lot of surface water or groundwater coming out into surface water, which is the reason why we put that there. But since the Monterey is not a primary aquifer, but that is a primary aquifer to humans, we thought, well, this is probably a lower priority. This is also a well that would be monitored by the county. And of course, all these wells had already had been budgeted for, and some grant funding had been provided for them as well. So that is a possibility. And, you know, in the GSP, the public draft that went out, I took out those 2 wells. I'm not sure if everyone's going to agree to that, but that's what I did. And when we talk about this, I would like to hear different directors' points of view on that, having these 2 wells be taken out. Okay, the next topic is the budget. So here we look to see where we could take. We cut down on monitoring. We were also given information that we should see if we could cut out some of the monitoring, surface water monitoring. And again, we have to be careful here because we can't cut it all out, because that would be that we're kind of non-responsive then, and we're doing worse than we have done historically. That's something we really can't do, is monitor less than we have in the past. Because we even from what we've done, we feel like it's not everything we would like, but obviously this is the real world. We can't get everything that we want, but to cut out even more would be detrimental. So we cut out the accretion runs that were going to happen every 5 years. That was a $50,000 item, and then we got quite a lot of comments about these zeros that we'd had in there, and so we moved those around and we gave some explanations, and some where there was no budget, and because it's already maybe been budgeted before, or because other agencies are going to be taking that on. And so that's where we arrived on this one. And so now we are just under the 2 million for over the 5 years. And I'm sure we're going to have plenty to discuss on this one later. Then on the concern about the private well owner protections, Director Cassidy wanted us to make sure that the GSP mentioned, and not just one location, but several where de minimis or those are domestic users that pump less than 2 acre-feet a year are not required to be metered. And so I pointed out where in the GSP those can be found. And then there was also mention of having some kind of statement on regulation and fees. And so what we did is there is what is this? Two sentences added about that the agency has no current plans to regulate or to charge a fee on either de minimis or non-de minimis, and that the agency may evaluate these options as funding mechanisms sometime in the future. They reserve that right to do that, and with any fees that may be proposed being commensurate to the benefit received by those users. And then we also have, just over the last few days, got some more information. He had read this staff report and wanted to add this sentence in red. I changed it a little bit from the wording that he provided. I just added this beginning bit in the front here that he was concerned that the board would just make these decisions without consultation with the private well owner. So that's all he wanted added in there. And so that covers those 3 items. And I'm going to hand it back to Dave here. I'm going to go back to this slide to remind us of those 3 points. And Dave, you can take it away now.
Yeah, thank you, Georgina. So what I'd like to do is, if you actually, can you move on to the first kind of content slide regarding the shallow monitoring wells? What I'd like to do is let's go ahead and using the raise hand mode so I can keep track of who would like to be into the queue with the board members. Please, what I want to do is let's just open up the floor for general questions and comments first. And then I want to then move on to basically moving us towards whether people feel that they are comfortable with and can support the resolution that the consultant team has provided in response to the feedback. And then, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and call at some point a straw poll to get a fairly accurate sense of where the board is in terms of resolving this or not. And then we're going to move on to and have a similar flow of discussion and straw polling on the other 2 items as well. So just opening the floor, let's go to, and again, I'm just want to focus, just for right now, I want to focus on the shallow monitoring well discussion first, and then we'll move on to the other topics. So let's go to Supervisor McPherson, and then to be followed by Dale and followed by Jack. So Bruce, go ahead.
I would, mine was on the budget. So is this the appropriate time you wanted to wait for that?
I want to hold on that, please. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll come back to you first when we get to the budget, but I'll ask that you go ahead and remove your or lower your hand for right now, if you don't mind.
Right.
All right, great. And then Dale, we'll go to you, and then to Jack. Excuse me.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, I just wanted to say that we were glad to be able to participate in that and to be able to share that well, so that we didn't have to drill an additional shallow well or a well that would monitor the surface water and the groundwater interconnections. And glad to see that that was done. Nobody wants to spend more money than we have to. So happy that we could do that, and glad it's worked out so that we can reduce that number of wells and cut back on that spending.
Okay, thank you, Jack.
Yes, I heard Georgina say something like, we probably should be okay with the state if we don't have those 2 additional new wells. But I just wanted to maybe just try and get a little bit more of a detail about that. In other words, is it possible that the state would not accept our plan because we had missing data, because we didn't have those 2 wells? Or is that unlikely? Or is it very unlikely? Or maybe you can give me something that make me comfortable. And I know you did say probably should be okay. But just if you wouldn't mind saying something again that kind of reinforces for me that we're probably okay.
Yeah, you know, it's a very difficult question for me to answer, and I felt very uncomfortable when it was asked of me at the last meeting, because I don't know. I'm not DWR. You know, I've only done one of these. Luckily, it was accepted, but there were a lot of wells and we didn't. And we were adding another 5 as well there, even though there were a lot of wells, and they were happy with that. So it's a completely different thing to try and judge. But you know, I don't think that this alone would give us an incomplete, a kind of a fail. What it might be is incomplete, where we would have to address in the plan, add into the 5th section there on plan implementation, future wells that would need to be drilled. And that's the only thing I could think that they would do. I'm not sure if they're on this call with us tonight. Not sure if they have been the last two meetings. And so that would be really the only reason why they would know that we were talking about this. So yeah, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question completely. I'm just throwing some thoughts out there that I have on
I'm
this
hearing you
topic.
say that they're unlikely to not accept. I forget the exact way to say that, to not accept our plan. It's more likely if they wanted more, they would ask us to do that as a corrective action. Something
That's
like
right.
that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just do a couple of points of order. I think Perret, if you can sort of either Perret or Georgina, I don't know whose screen we're looking at, but for some reason we've got the map, the actual presentation is minimized, and there's a placeholder holding there for, at least on my screen, for Bruce's name. I don't want to have Bruce be muted, but I know there was some background noise, and what happens is on Zoom, whenever there's background noise, that sort of brings whoever that is front and center. But the bottom line is, let's get the screen, the presentation up in front and center for everybody to see. All right, let's go to Jack, and then in queue is Jack, Doug, excuse me, Gail, and then Ruth. Jack, go ahead.
This
Oh,
is
I'm sorry, my
this
hand
is
was-
Doug. I would note that
Or Doug, I'm sorry, Doug. I'm sorry, go ahead. Doug, go ahead.
Tom from DWR had his hand up. He may have wanted to weigh in.
I was looking to see if I don't see him on the list, but Tom, if you're there, if you are here, I'm not seeing you on the list, but if you're here and you would wish to weigh in with all the inherent caveats that I know that DWR feels necessary to provide. If you're here and you would like to speak to Jack's comments, please go ahead, and Doug, then I'll come back to you.
Dave, thank you. I can't speak directly to his comments because there's no way to say yes or no. That's something that comes out of the review of the entire document. What I would encourage you to do would be to review maybe some of the DWR comments on 2 of the GSP documents that were not approved and had incomplete. Because what I would say is that interconnected surface water was a substantial point, at least in the Paso Basin. So I think it might give you a better feel of where it could go if during your public review process, you also kind of read back on those comments and maybe tried to incorporate them along the way. So when you got closer to the final draft, you'd say, hey, this answered some of those questions that were outlying in other GSP plans. And that's about the best I could do for saying yes or no, something would be acceptable.
All right, thank you. Very sage advice. Appreciate it, Tom. Doug, let's go to you, please.
All right, thanks. As regards dropping that well in the Monterey, and since it specifically relates to interconnected surface water where City of Santa Cruz has a particular interest, Georgina, I'd appreciate understanding how we would fill whatever data gap that well's loss might present, if any. What sort of analytics would we do differently, or how would we deal with the fact that we would not have hard data from that spot? If you can amplify on that at all.
Again, that data would be very useful in the model, how much water is coming out at that contact there, and we're just making assumptions in the model on that. If we were able to fill that, we would be able to calibrate the model better at that location. It's also located right near a gauge, which is partly also why it's there, and because then we know what's happening in the gauge and we can have a look at the corresponding groundwater levels nearby.
And just to clarify, how much money are we saving? Mindful of the moral hazard issue that we're spending at least some of other people's money, but how much money are we saving by dropping that well?
Well, the county was going to take on that. It's in an area not covered by any of the districts, so the county was going to be monitoring that themselves, and you know, it's included already in the grant. Where we said we would be doing a total of 10 wells, so 6 of them would be these. I don't think we have to drill all 10 wells. I think Sarah looked at the grant and it wasn't specified exactly how many wells needed to be drilled. But you know, there is money to cover this. This is a very shallow well too. It's only going to go 60 to 100 feet. It's very shallow.
Thank you.
All right. Sierra, do you, to more specifics of Doug's question, do you have a specific monetary answer for that?
I think when we wrote the grant, we estimated the shallow wells would cost about $15,000 to $20,000 to drill. That's already covered. Again, that is grant funded. So it's not necessarily costing the agency. We've already built out our match on that grant. So we can see if we can reallocate that money somewhere else, although the monitoring is the only thing the grant's paying, that particular grant was paying for. Hopefully we don't just leave it on the table, which would be the other option. And then the annual, the monitoring cost to the county of going out and doing that site, cognizant of the fact that we'd also be doing the ones right next to it, you know, it's maybe a couple $1,000s a year, which is probably a gross overestimate of how much it's saving the county. But again, we had offered to pay for that, so it wasn't going to be charged to the district or the agency.
All right, Doug, did that answer you were immediately looking for?
Yeah, I'm satisfied. Thanks for
all
all
right,
that.
thank you. We had Gail and then Eden in the queue, but I see that they've lowered their hands, so I don't know whether that was them doing that themselves or whether Perrette had been also assisting in that. So Gail, or in this order, Gail and then Eden, did you still wish to weigh in with an open question?
I decided, Dave, that I would just reserve my comment on this one until we get to a later issue, because they're kind of related and I don't want to waste time now.
Okay. Eden, similarly, anything I'm assuming you chose to pull yourself out of the queue?
Yeah, I lowered my hand after Sierra answered the question about cost.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go to Dale, please. And then I'm going to move our conversation here in a different direction towards kind of where people are at on the proposed approach. So Dale, go ahead, please.
Hey, Georgina, just a question. Would it be something that we could, propose that we're going to be doing these, drilling these wells initially, but, we flag the 8 and then just kind of have those as placeholders to know that, if we needed to additional data or things like that, that we could still have these to drill, later on if needed.
Well, to drill them, then we would have to get some other source of funding. We have the funding already for them, for that one in particular, and so it would just cost more to the agency than unless some kind of grant fund, which would need a match as well, again, to be spent before you get it covered by the grant. So and also, I've heard someone say maybe drill them and not monitor them, but it takes several years of monitoring to get some kind of a trend and to be able to analyze that data. So the sooner you can start monitoring them, the more useful they are.
So it's sort of a now or never.
Well, no, you could do it later, but it's going to cost more. So
okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other just sort of clarifying or general information questions that any board members wish to ask at this time on this? Seeing none and hearing none, then what I want to do is I want to start moving us towards essentially, like I said, a straw poll of where the board is at on the resolution. Do any board members want to make any comments or weigh in on anything regarding the proposed resolution? And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for public comment, even though we're doing straw poll. This is a non-binding poll. I nonetheless want to honor our intentions of opening up the floor. And then thereafter, I'm going to, again, call a straw poll. It's not going to be a binding poll. It will be kind of me going around the room, as we say, and as we've done in the past. And the question will be posed in the form of, is anybody opposed to, rather than approving of. So that's what I'm leading us towards. But for right now, again, I'm just wanting to get an initial pulse check before I even do that. So we'll go to Chairman Perry, and then we'll go to Jack. Chris, you there? Where did you go?
Sorry, given the circumstances, I would say more data rather than less. Is no cost to the agency. We're not going to might leave some money on the table. I don't mind not spending public money. That's fine if we didn't need to, but there it is. I mean, it's the only. We don't have much knowledge of the Monterey. It's a place where it interacts with surface water. It seems like no harm, no foul. It seems like more energy and effort to not do it and then take any little risk or just miss out on some knowledge than it would be to do it. I don't see the downside of drilling that well.
Okay. Let me, before I go to Jack, excuse me. Georgina, again, because I want to get everybody very grounded in sort of where we are on the content of the document. At this point in time, the document is reflecting what you've shown, which is unto itself then a reflection of response to various board member input. At this time, were the board to indicate that they would prefer something different, in reality, we really don't have the time to make, and we really don't have the procedural means to make any of those adjustments, any text decisions now. Instead, we would have to make those revisions at the close of the public comment period and after all public comment has come in, because we really don't have sequentially the way to make any immediate adjustments to the document. Well, or we could, but it would be procedurally somewhat cumbersome. Am I correct about that, Georgina? And also Paret, if you want to weigh in on that.
Well, it depends how many things have to be changed. You know, it took us weeks to do what the changes that we made already. Obviously, it's not going to be that scale again. It's going to be, you know, it depends on what people think. How many things might be changed because it has to go out tomorrow.
So Chris, again, then in that context, to clarify, you would be recommending, notwithstanding what's on the screen, you would be recommending not doing this and instead to not be moving the Monterey well at this time. That would be your preference, correct?
My preference would be to have the Monterey well drilled.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
But it doesn't matter. I don't care if it happens after public comment.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to get the clarity and get any feedback that we have again on the new proposal, but I also want everybody grounded in the fact of what we can and can't do sequentially in terms of changes to the document at this time. Jack, go ahead, and then we'll go to, excuse me. And well, again, I think I saw Dale's hand up, but now it's gone. But Jack, we'll go to you.
I just want to second what Chris said. He said it well.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go to Mark. Mark, go ahead, please.
Yes, Georgiana, you've mentioned that monitoring the Monterey Formation at this location would give us a link between water levels there and surface water. If we can show after a couple of years that we have a good link between those two, and I think that surface water monitoring is more laborious than getting these water levels particularly if we have data loggers in place in these wells, if we can show that, does that potentially, if this well is drilled, do we then have the potential down the line, if that data linkage is there, to reduce surface water monitoring in this area?
I'm not sure about that. And you're right that we are trying to get this link, and because we can't directly in the stream flow measure depletion of stream flow from pumping, you know, the stream flow gauges cannot pick that up, but we're hoping that the groundwater levels we can use as a proxy. I'm gonna have to, I can talk about the well, but on the surface water, I'm going to ask Sierra if she could answer that question, because they have been working for decades on the stream flow monitoring, and the county has a much better idea on that issue.
I could see a scenario where in 10 years or so, if we feel like we've really got a good handle on this relationship, maybe we reconsider the location of stream gauges. I believe that gauge is already out there, so we're already getting the data from it. And we have historically, Georgina mentioned that there's been monitoring kind of throughout this area for the last couple decades, and that's true between the county and the San Lorenzo Valley Water District. There's been extensive surface water monitoring at different locations, and it does make sense every once in a while to change where you're monitoring if you think you're not getting anything new out of one site and you feel like there might be an advantage to moving it. So I wouldn't take it off the table in the next, you know, in the longer term that we could reduce some of this, but I think for what we're addressing right now for the 5 year, I really don't think that we'd have what we would need in the next 5 years to.
Okay,
to assume we can.
you've answered the question that I had. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, seeing no other hands up, I want to go ahead and open up the floor for any public comment and also any staff comment on the topic at hand. So, Correct, if you can assist, I know that at this point in time, if you are a member of the public and you are online, please use the raise hand mode. If you are only on the phone, you can press *9. Correct, is there anything else?
I'm looking at them now, and there is no hands raised.
Yeah.
No indication of public wanting to speak.
Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do at this time, actually notwithstanding what I said a few minutes ago, I am going to pose this question a little bit differently to the group. I'm going to go around the room because again, we're faced with a circumstance where, as we said, we have a current version. It's fairly necessary that it goes out tomorrow to be triggering the 60-day period because of the schedule that you've already seen. I will unabashedly say to you all that on this and the other two topics, as well as any other topics tonight, my responsibility is really to assess iteratively whether at the end of the night we're going to get consensus or a majority of a yes vote to release this document. So I am moving us, I'm being very, very blunt here, I am moving us through these straw polls to get a sense of, do we have items that a majority of board members are in opposition to that would then prohibit us getting an agreement on the overall document? And I know that sounds somewhat mercenary, and I apologize for that, but that's sort of the nature of the game here. Nonetheless, because there have been some adjustments made to this, you've heard Georgina speak to what could or could not be made at this time. What I'm going to ask is the following. I'm going to go around the room and I'm going to ask board members to say, answer two questions. Do you support the revision, or would you prefer putting the well back in or wells back in? So we have a sense from you as a board of where we might go after the public comment period. So do you support the revision, or do you propose going back to adding wells? And does the current proposal lead you to be opposed to releasing the document? I know that that's sort of framing things a little bit in the negative, and I apologize, but unfortunately that's kind of how we have to do it. So the two questions are, do you Do you support the revision, or do you propose going back to adding monitoring wells? And does the revision as you see it prohibit you from supporting the public release? So in no particular order, I'm going to go to Chair Pollock. Or I'm sorry, member Pollock.
Sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
May I, it's just one well, but it's just the Monterey well that we're talking about putting back in or not? Not what
Yeah,
else?
I'm sorry. And also, are other people hearing that beeping noise?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm trying to see where that's.
It's the caller at 338-2153.
I think they put us on.
There should not be a caller at 338-2153. That's the San Lorenzo Valley District Office. And all of our members are present.
Well, I just muted that number. And that appears to have solved the issue. So we'll hope that is the case based on what I'm seeing on the little microphone icons. Okay, thank you for that clarification, Georgina. So with that, Director Perry, your opinions on the current revision or adding the well back in? I know you've already stated it, but I'm going to come back to you for the record. And then does the current revision bring you to feel opposed to approve the public draft at this time?
Add the well back in, but I don't care if we do it now or later.
All right, Director Cassidy.
What are the three parts of your question again?
Do you support the current revision, or conversely, do you support adding the well back in? And does the current revision lead you to be feeling prohibiting or feeling opposed to approving the release of the public draft at this time? So we have a current proposal. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to add the well back in, but it would not prevent me from supporting the current draft.
All right, thank you. Director Mahood?
Abstain, no.
So you're abstaining on both the questions?
Basically, whether the revision or going back to what we had before doesn't really address the fundamental issues that I had with the monitoring network. So that's why I'm just abstaining. And this revision or going back to the other one would not affect how I voted.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I appreciate that clarity. Excuse me, Director Brown.
Yes, I would concur to support putting the well back in, but whether it's done now or later, as others have said, would not prohibit my voting in favor of the proposal.
All right, thank you. Director Smalley.
I am okay with having this well removed and the draft as it is written right now being released to the public.
Thank you. Director Engfer.
Sorry, add the well back in, release the document.
Thank you. Director McPherson.
Yeah, add the well and release the document.
All right, Director Stiles.
Add the well, release the document.
Thank you. Director Koopman.
Yeah, I don't think any significant water is flowing out of the Monterey, so I'm okay with removing well.
And Jeff, it's really hard to hear you. You're breaking up, so I don't know if you're on a headset or something like that, but maybe you move some around.
Okay, can you hear me now? I stopped my video.
A little better, yeah. Go ahead, answer the question if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm okay with removing the well. I think that there's not a lot of water coming from the Monterey, the surface, and I'm okay with the document going forward as is.
All right, thank you. I believe that I touched on everybody. Director Pollock, Director Pollock, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I will support adding the well back in and releasing the document.
All right. Okay, now I think Director Dills, I'm sorry.
I support adding the well back in, and I'm not opposed to submitting the plan as it is currently.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, so at this time, thank you. That's helpful information to get a sense from the board of where you're at on this. With that, Georgina, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic, the budget topic.
Okay. Okay, here we are. Dave?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, oh, right, sorry. That's me. Never mind. I was making notes to myself.
Sorry, I didn't give you enough time.
No, that's me having a brain freeze. All right, so we're gonna do the same exercise here, which is to go ahead and open up the floor and get feedback from board members as to any questions or comments they have about the revisions on the budget. I know that in particular, Perrette and Sierra have done a significant amount of work on this in a staff capacity. So before we actually open up the floor, Perrette and Sierra, I'm going to look to you all first to see if there's further insights that you have. I see the members of the board in the queue, so I will come to Director Smoley and Director Mayhood in a minute, but I just want to first come to staff that had done the revisions, and then we'll move on to opening the floor. So Perrette, Sierra.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. So as I've been looking at this table a lot in the last couple of months, I realized a couple of things maybe that have not been clear. One is the word budget. As much as that we're using this terminology for the GSP, budget for public sector means something different. Budget typically is drafted and becomes adopted or approved, and then it gives the staff authority to use those funds. So this is not that level document. It truly is our best guess, best estimate, best projection for the next 5 years. What could it be costing to run an agency with the scope and the size? And how we came up with those. So we each have kind of our strength, and just based on what we've been doing recently for the last 4 years, Scotts Valley Water District has been the business agent and kind of supporting this agency in the administrative capacity. So I took the responsibility of coming up with some of those numbers. How I arrived at those was I used my my professional experience with just running public sector agency office. I also looked for any comparable numbers from other agencies, and as we know, there's not very many of them. We do have one neighbor, so I did rely on some of the Mid-County Groundwater Agency, what they have been spending. And to be honest, we are about the same size agencies, and I looked at their budget and I said it's way too much for us. So ours is our projections are about half of what Mid-County had. So that kind of was one of my goals, is not necessarily benchmark with them, but see where we can do some savings. Another thing that might not be clear of this is the administrative and business operations. That bucket is not, I'm echoing. Let me try this. Off and on. So it is not consultant money. This was my best attempt to estimate what money, including staff funding, could be going into administrating this agency. And this is still to be determined in the future, how this agency is going to be run, if it's staff, if it's hired consultant, if it's a third party. But those are just some numbers that I felt based on the time that I have personally been spending, my staff has been spending, and some other components such as the legal that's outside outreach. Are those going to be exactly those numbers? Do not know. This is an exercise that is going to be in the future. And then I think another fallacy that we had here is it was assumed maybe by the board that all of those numbers are new numbers. They are not. Some of those activities have been happening for years, and it's just highlighting and showing them as part of under this umbrella. For example, the annual reports, Scotts Valley Water District has been producing annual reports for the last 20 years. And I know very well what the cost of those are. it has been smaller scope project reports because of the area that we looked at was much smaller, and now it's going to be basin wide. But it's fair to assume that the annual reports that we have been producing, that those are stopping, and instead we will be picking up a task of doing similar reports basin wide. So this is one of the prime examples of that. The other one is the monitoring of the especially the stream flow. County has been doing it for, I believe, at least 15 years. It's not a new activity. It's been paid by county and San Lorenzo already. And the money you see here is not, is essentially stands for the same activity, just more featured and showed as under this agency's responsibility going forward, rather than under separate activities. But most importantly, please keep in mind, this is not a budget. This is something that is needs to be discussed by this agency going forward before we get into next year's budget cycle. So that's all from me.
All right, thank you. Sierra, anything that you want to add to that before I go to the floor for the directors that have got their hands in the queue?
Yeah, I just want to point out a couple things that we did change. One was the accretion runs, which were pricey, and I think they're useful, but I don't think that they're necessary. They're definitely not the level of work that DWR expects, and I think it's something that, should it seem like it would be useful in 5 years, maybe the county will just take that on as a thing that we do because we think it's useful information. So I think that was one that seemed reasonable to take out. And I do want to reiterate that some of these things are in the chapter, it's called a cost estimate. In section 5, this table is called a cost estimate, and that's what it is. They're not, I don't want to call them guesses, but they're not necessarily precise. And every year, as we have been doing, we will have a work plan and a budget that gets approved by the board. And in that work plan and budget, we will have actual costs that we have vetted, that we know what they're going to be, and we'll have work plans associated with them. And that's what you'll be approving on an annual basis. So, it's very likely we're not going to spend $20,000 a year on communication and outreach, but there might be one year where we really feel like we need to, and it just seems wiser to have that estimate now than it is to not be mentally prepared for that, not have thought along those lines in case something comes up. So I feel really confident about these numbers. I think that they're realistic, and I think they're required. I think it's definitely possible that in year by year, we're not going to spend that much. And that would be great if that happens. That's what we'll be looking at our budget for, and we'll be working very closely with everybody then. But, if we tried to lower a number here, doesn't mean it's actually going to cost less. If we say, well, if we lower a number on here to make it look like it's going to cost less, we still have to do the work, and it's still going to cost what it costs. So I encourage you to keep that in mind, and definitely happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. All right, let's go to the queue. We'll start with Mark, followed by Gail, followed by Bruce. Mark, go ahead, please. And you're muted right now.
I appreciate what's being said, that these are a budget, and this is not necessarily what we're going to be spending. But I do have the concern, if this is an expectation of what we're potentially going to be spending, that this is kind of what we're targeting. So that's what I'm struggling or wrestling with at this point. So some of what I have are questions, others are more direct comments. The questions, and I've got the 5 points. On the administrative and planning efforts, all of that first task. I see 100,000 for the admin and planning alone, and then I total 163 for the overall administration business operations. And I thought that we were right now in a fairly intense effort that required more of the administration, business operations. But once this GSP gets submitted to the state and is in the state review period, I was under the impression that the level of activity that this agency would need to be doing would go down significantly. Do these costs reflect going down significantly, or how does the process work in in 2022, 2023, kind of these initial years of getting through this?
So are you opposing that? Are you making that as a statement, or you're posing that as a question you'd like to get an answer?
That's a question. It's more, I don't understand the 163 on an ongoing basis for what I thought we were going to be on a more limited activity level over the next number of years. And I guess Peret's the one that could address that question.
Well, one thing I can say is I've also heard that this giving free staff support by two larger, actually the 3-member agencies, that has to stop. That needs to be counted for. For the last 5 years, we have not been counting for any of the staff work that has been going into that. And some of that is going to stop or slow down. Some of that needs to be continuing because this agency is just in its infancy and needs to now start implementing what it's set out to do in the GSP. I don't know the cost of that. I don't know, this board has not discussed it yet, what it wants to do, how it wants to run this agency, if continued collaborative method is something that works for us and is suitable, or do we want to go and find a different structure for supporting this agency. So I think that's my best guess. Of some of the admin, pure admin that gets done now, it will be less of that just because of the frequency of board meetings. But there is another whole task that nobody has been paying for, but we all have been paying for by contributing our time.
So are you saying that to one of my subsequent comments about omitted costs of staff time not being reflected, you think that a large portion of that is this 100,000 that's in the first line item?
That's my attempt to somehow highlight that it's not, there's no free lunches.
Okay, so that's your agency's time, San Lorenzo Valley Water District staff time, the county's time that's being spent on that.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. And you don't know what our board is going to be asking of this agency going forward. Okay. All right. My second question is on the annual report, the overall costs that I see. There were 4 items that fed into it: the groundwater modeling simulations, the consultant's technical report, the annual reports, and then the data management system. When I totaled all of those and put a 10% contingency, which is what you have in the bottom, the total annual report was 126.5. And after looking at the state's requirements for the annual reports, I could understand that at the outset, the initial annual report, but I would expect and hope that subsequent annual reports are significantly less than that once a template is put together, set up, and it's data input into that, changing some of the narrative. Is that a reasonable expectation?
All I can offer is we've been doing those reports for 20 years, and I used that historical data to come up with large part of those. Not all of them feed to the annual report, the as needed tech support. This is just what it says it is, as needed. If there is a specific hydrogeology question, we have a purchase order with our consultant that we can tap into and get them quickly on the phone, helping us. Annual reports, they have been running in the recent years, and we're using a template. It's pretty much the same, but we are paying about 40,000 a year for much smaller footprint area. So, and very much of a one agency that they are evaluating how we manage our groundwater program. So I think 45 is very reasonable. And the others, I would leave them as be there. The simulations, they might not need to happen, they might. And the things that could trigger new simulations is something, for example, increased pumping or new wells in the area that they haven't existed. Climate change could run a new model simulation, things like that. But this is only per request. If the agency is interested and it benefits the agency, we would need to do that. The simulations are not cheap. I mean, we've been through that at any time.
Yes, I agree with that. I understand that's a major data crunching effort that needs to be done for those simulations.
Let's go ahead. I just want to make sure we got lots to cover. So go ahead and continue with your questions, Mark. Go ahead.
Okay. The third aspect that I have a question on is this interconnected surface water monitoring, the 40,000. And I know that that's one that's been, I don't know, bashed or do we need to do this? And that's still one that I am struggling with significantly. I want to cut that to a fourth of that number without, significant scientific backup to be able to do that. But it just is something I don't want to have to commit us to spending. But then I hear you saying, but that's something that the county's already been doing.
Well, the county and the San Lorenzo Valley Water District have been monitoring surface water in this area for the past 20 plus years. And, Rick is probably the best to talk about where the district is monitored. Just in the last couple of years, we've transitioned it from both of us independently monitoring to working together through this agency to monitor. So a little history, because I know, Mark, you're kind of new to the you're new to the agency. So we actually already installed there are 5 stream gauges in the monitoring plan. The reason that we need to monitor stream flow is because the depletion of interconnected surface water indicator is not actually about, even though we've got these shallow monitoring wells to try to help us create a proxy for stream flow, the actual indicator is stream flow. That's the thing that DWR cares about. They want to know, they want a quantified reduction in the cubic feet per second of stream flow associated with pumping. That's not something you can just monitor with a stream gauge. You also can't just monitor it with a shallow monitoring well. You need to have all of the data together. You can't have a proxy, and this is very clearly outlined in the regulations. You can't have a proxy, which is our shallow groundwater monitoring wells, without being able to associate that with the actual indicator, which is a cubic feet per second of stream flow. We can't do that. Right now, we're kind of estimating it based on we're using the model to estimate it, but we're very clear in the plan that this is a pretty significant data gap, and it's something that they want precision on. We can't achieve precision without surface water monitoring. So we've already installed 4 of the 5 stream gauges. The 5th one has already been purchased. We've just been waiting to put it out until we've identified the precise location of the associated shallow groundwater monitoring well, which is one of the ones that we just talked about previously. Those 2 pieces together will help us to get this required quantified depletion of interconnected surface water number, which is what we're actually required to report to DWR. That is what the indicator is actually asking for. And so we know very well, and I think Rick and Carly can attest to the cost of what it costs to have a screen gauge. I estimated, and I think pretty realistically, that 5 screen gauges is going to cost about $40,000 a year because they need to be checked. At least monthly, the data needs to be downloaded, and then there's going to be calibration associated with that and some processing associated with that. And I think $40,000 is a very, it's more likely to be more than that than less than that. And I think, as Georgina pointed out, this isn't something that we can cut out. To cut that number down to 10, it's still going to cost $40,000. And we need to do this work. If we tell DWR, oh, well, we've just cut out 4 of our stream gauges, so now we have 1 stream gauge for the entire basin, they will absolutely not accept that plan. So I understand that it's a cost, but this is a cost that our agencies have been paying for many years. And it's important. It's important not just to this cause, it's important in general, but I really don't think that there's any other alternatives here.
Okay, you're clarifying for me. This is a cost and a task that has been ongoing by not only my water district, but the county also over the last number of years. And the cost that you're putting in here is based on that historical data and information. Begrudgingly, I say, okay then. The last comment that I have is it possible on this table to indicate where this money is coming from? Brett, you mentioned earlier the staff time that's incorporated into this. I want to go to the split that's been agreed to by this agency at the beginning, so that it's clear to anybody from the public where these budgeted costs are likely or needing to going to be coming from, with Scotts Valley Water District at 60% for an approximate number of X at the bottom of this table to whatever the total works out to be. What about that thought?
We don't have an agreement past this development phase. That's another activity that this board will have to be taking on, to deciding how to share the costs in the future.
Okay. Then I wanted to put that one out there as a consideration for this evening. It's part of the discussion to just include that in here, because without these agencies covering the cost for this in that approximate amount, where does the money come from for this? So that's all my questions. Thank you for giving me the time on this.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
And then, you know, and the point that you just made in closing, Mark, is frankly not uncommon to what many groundwater agencies faced as they were in their inception stages of, you know, what happens if nobody steps forward, then what? And the conclusion actually was that agencies would go pretty rapidly into prohibition stage for not even being able to form their agencies. And I think the same would hold true here. You know, that's you have a unique circumstance where a state law was created that forced the forming of public legal agencies that are nonetheless dependent on then administering funds to do so. And I recognize that the whole exercise of going through this kind of budgeting process, where it, as Perrette and Sierra said, is it's putting forward projections, but it's not a true actual budget, and it's dependent on the board actually having subsequent true budget development conversations creates a little cognitive dissonance as to, well, so what the heck does this really mean? So I get that. All right. Look at our queue. I see that Ruth has jumped in. Excuse me. All right. So Gail, we have you next.
Yes, that answer was not very satisfying, but assuming that we start somewhere similar to what the current distribution of costs are, it's a sizable number, okay? And the number, and that's why Mark is suggesting that it needs to be there. And it is a number that our district simply cannot afford. And basically, we've created a situation where we have basically said we have to come up with $2 million in the next 5 years. And I believe that a lot of that is based on a poor premise. And I will explain that in a minute. But let me just point out that the numbers we're talking about, if we went with the same 60-30-10, would represent for San Lorenzo Valley would be an instantaneous increase in our operating expenses of 2%. And in the case of Scotts Valley, it would be an instantaneous increase, I checked your budget last night, of 4%. So I'm really shocked that members of the Scotts Valley Water District, those representatives, aren't sort of alarmed at this budget. One of the reasons that I voted against a consolidation with Scotts Valley was simply because until the budget issues of Santa Margarita got squared away and we found some way to distribute the costs more fairly among the beneficial users, is we would be saddling our district ratepayers with a huge number, basically 90% of the costs of Santa Margarita. And this is just, you know, I can't ask them to do that. But let me go back and just give like a 30,000 foot view of how I see where we're at. And I'll just, for those of you that don't realize, I've been, although I've only been elected and voting on this in the last, since January 1st or December of last year, I have been involved as a public member since it started. I've come to most of the meetings. And what I would say is that after all of the work we've done, it's actually a really good news story. What we've learned is that, yes, our ancestors in the 70s and 80s and early 90s were overdrawing the system, but starting somewhere around 2010, 2012, we stopped being in overdraft, both in terms of what happens as measured in the groundwater levels and in the modeling. And that we've been in balance since then. And in fact, since 2017, there's even a suggestion that we're in a slight uptick. It says in chapter 3, explicitly, there is no evidence that the current level of pumping is damaging groundwater dependent ecosystems. It says explicitly, there is no evidence that current levels of pumping are damaging the fish. And yet we've spent $2 million in the last few years on this process to basically write a document that acts like we are damaging the fish, that we are damaging GDEs, and that we're in some kind of emergency situation. We are not like Mid-County. The only issue we have is that because of what happened in the 80s, we've drawn down, you know, our sort of bank account, and we've started to raise it up again. And what we need to do is we'd like to get a little bit of buffer so that we can deal with climate change. The other thing that's been a great news thing out of the modeling is that we can do this with 3 fairly simple things. One is increasing the work that we've been doing in terms of efficiencies and conservation, more conjunctive use, and basically using the SLV's allocation of Loch Lomond water. That these things, which are relatively inexpensive, but more important, we actually know how to do, will pretty much solve that problem, at least for 10 or 20 years, the modeling suggests, and maybe at some point, you know, we'll have to do something more, but that's 20 years down the road. But so what worries me is we've created this document that is forcing us into a lot of monitoring that really isn't necessary, and we're not going to learn anything we don't already know about surface groundwater, you know, stuff sinks through the Santa Margarita, it comes out at the top of the Monterey. You know, this is just, and even the document in chapter 3 says explicitly, this is a very complicated interaction. The stream flow measurements aren't enough. We're still going to have to model all of this. So it all becomes very, very circular. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is I just don't think, you know, I look at this budget, and this budget doesn't even include those parts of the things that some of the monitoring and other things that we have been doing, or the expectation that will be absorbed by activities. So, but even accepting it as is, it sort of gives me this sense of this is not even doing a project. We have set ourselves up for spending $2 million over 5 years, even if we do nothing. And that's kind of like, to me, it's like having a Mercedes sitting in my driveway with a driver revving its engine and not going anywhere, right? That we've set up this expensive thing that doesn't even get us to somewhere. So what I don't understand is why we don't, given the good news story, and we know how to get most of the problems solved, at least for 10 to 20 years, why we don't start low and take it slow. And both in the projects and in terms of the infrastructure, you know, and the costs of this. And I just feel like it's not sustainable. I don't see how Scotts Valley can afford this. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm very uncomfortable with this. Other things, you know, I think the tone of chapter 4 creates this impression that we have to have something this expensive, and I simply don't take that as fact. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me go ahead and go to Bruce, Supervisor McPherson.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the comments. And I know there's some we all know there's some concerns about the cost estimate for the agency in the coming years, especially the 5 years. And we understand that there are estimates at this time, and we can hammer those details closer to the time the agency is forming. But I'd like to address those concerns now to the greatest extent possible while we have time to work them out. And I think all of our partner agencies and beneficial users have worked well together throughout this process, and I'd like to see that continue. So in addition to other changes in the draft GSP being suggested tonight by the board, I'd like to direct staff to come back to the board in a month with an agenda item to form an ad hoc committee of the board that would delve more deeply into the finances of the agency and try to reach a solution that addresses the budget concerns. I think there would be, I say an ad hoc committee because time is of the essence. And I'd be happy to serve on that committee as a county's representative. And I think we should have representation from San Lorenzo Valley and Scotts Valley and Mount Hermon and the city of Santa Cruz. And that would be at 5 members because for an ad hoc committee. Now, if the well owners wanted to be formally on that ad hoc committee, that'd be fine. But I think we should have some representation of some type from the city of Santa Cruz. I think all those entities should really be at the table in order to reach a solution that I think we could just really hone in on, and that addresses how we're going to fund the agency's work into the future. So that's my suggestion, because there's a sense here that we're not all on board where we are now, and I think we really need to concentrate our efforts, and I think that's the right way we could do it, go about it at this time, because we're on a short time schedule. I know that, but that's just my general thoughts.
All right, thank you, Bruce. So let me just pause for a minute from a point of order perspective. Then we've got Ruth and then Chris in the queue. As I've stated previously, I would go around the horn to assess, in this case, opposition to the current budget, the proposed budget. Clearly, Director Smalley and Mahood have expressed their concerns, and so what I would like to then do, Bruce, based on your suggestion, is treat that as a separate question, because again, what I'm kind of hearing you saying is an acknowledgement that there's a time of the essence in order to get this out the door, but you recognize the severity and the issues that are being raised, and you want to start getting the ball rolling on resolving them, but we obviously can't resolve them in the next 24 hours, but you want to put something in motion to sort of direct staff to start putting that in motion. And as we've done in the past, we can, we can do kind of straw poll method to get direction from you as a board to do that. That doesn't have to be a formal action tonight, which would put us in violation of the Brown Act, since your suggestion isn't currently on the agenda. So am I inferring that correctly? You'd like to get the ball rolling, get the direction from the board to acknowledge the concerns that have been raised, but that would allow us to sort of simultaneously go to public if we can, but also get the ball rolling on what you suggested. Am I inferring that correctly, Bruce?
That's correct. And yeah, and to do it next month because it is not on the agenda today.
Yeah,
that's correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So just point of order, that's how I'll handle it. Let me in that stage, let me go to Ruth and then to Chris, and then hopefully we can then move on this topic from a time frame perspective. Ruth, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that we've been using the word budget, that this is a cost estimate. This isn't a budget where we need to go over every line item and worry about it. This is to do what the state is telling us we have to do, what staff and consultants think it's going to cost. And my feeling is, as we get into this process, that's when we can decide the nuts and bolts of who pays, what we're really going to do. But this is an important thing to get into the plan and get moving. This is an unfunded mandate. And I'm not thrilled about a lot of the costs, but there have so far been a lot of grants to take care of things. And I am really hoping that there will be lots more grants coming forward. But my vote is, I'll take that back, not a vote. My opinion is let's approve this and work out the details in the next few months because it's way too big to work on tonight.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Chris and then Terry, and actually I'm going to go to Chris and then to Eden, and then Terry, I see your hand up at his staff. I'm going to put you to the back of the line. I apologize about that. Chris, go ahead.
I essentially agree with Ruth, and I think we got to always keep in mind that this is for someone else to look at. It's a reasonable cost estimate. It would be great if we don't have to end up doing things, but to count on that, to make this really low, to lowball this now will just make the state look at us like we're inexperienced and don't know what we're doing. And they look at mid-county with something twice as much, a similar sized district. They're not going to look at the details that they have more complicated work to do. And I would say that unfortunately and fortunately, the work of this agency is just going to begin when this is all done. So I don't think we're going to go back into hibernation all of a sudden when this is done and say, okay, well, we're finished now. Even the low-hanging fruit that we want to do is just going to take attention. It's going to take staff time, and it's going to take board time. It's going to take consultant time. Everything costs money, and there's no way around it. If you're leading a public agency, you have to accept it, and you got to do your best.
All right, thank you. As I said, let's go to Eden, and then I'll pause to see if there's any further board member comments, and then I'll open up the floor for staff, and I'll come to you, Terry. Eden, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with Ruth or Chris. This is a draft that we want to get out for public comment, but to be the guy who bums out everyone at the party, I can't think of an example where a joint powers authority created agency or any governmental organization has ever come. It's semantics, whether you're calling it a budget or a cost estimate, it doesn't matter. I can't think of a single example where they didn't throw a budget or a cost estimate on something and did not spend as much, if not more than that amount of money. Nothing has ever come in under that amount of money. So we're all fooling ourselves if we think there's, in some fantasy, we're going to come in under that number there. I just never seen it happen, but anyway.
All right, thank you. Let me go to Doug and then Jeff, well, actually Jeff first and in the queue. We'll go to Jeff and then to Doug. And like I said, I want to try to close out board comment, at least initially. Jeff, go ahead, please.
I really appreciated Gail's speech. The spending on all this mandated kind of bureaucracy seems excessive, and it seems like we could be spending this money on projects and actually doing water savings or helping the fish out instead of just generating a bunch of paperwork and documentation. So I think that her speech was very good. But one proposal might be, in order to get us move us forward, is that we consider this budget we could maybe say that this budget was put together by staff as a proposed example of what our budgets might look like, and then just allow it to be released to the public right now. And then we are acknowledging that we're going to work on this budget going forward and plan it out in detail.
Well, Jeff, this is Dave. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I think essentially that's what the release of a public draft is doing. It's a draft. How would you want that articulated, other than the fact that it's a draft that's been put together by staff and an agency? I'm not sure what you're saying then.
Just to
I mean,
make
it is subject to revision by the very nature of it going out to public draft, and that's what it is for the purposes of comment and then subsequent revision if necessary.
Just to make it clear that it's an initial proposal that hasn't been worked out in detail.
Okay. Let's go to Doug, and then I see Dale's hand up. Doug, go ahead.
Thanks, and I recognize that since we haven't been invited to write checks to support this agency life to date, I'm speaking above my pay grade right here, but it really feels like, the conversation, spending as much time as this on what are at best projections has been informative, but I don't think it's terribly productive. And frankly, it's kind of inappropriate to be spending as much time as we are on what are akin to, in my mind, to allowances in a time and materials budget. I mean, you can lower the allowances, but it's still a T&M budget, and you're still going to pay for what it takes to get the job done. And I think we have to remember the project costs here that are going to be borne by the member agencies, if that's the right term of art, are going to dwarf these administrative costs over time. And to be unrealistic about that, I think is, well, I'm not going to finish that sentence. To Eden's comment, we have a pretty well managed water department down in Santa Cruz. I've seen CIP projects come through under budget at point of completion. So it does happen from time to time, at least in my narrow experience. And finally, we have to get this done. It's not just a good idea, it's the law. And if we don't, then, you can have the state managing this groundwater basin instead of us. And I don't think anyone here wants that. That's all.
All right, let's go to Dale, and then perhaps we can close out board member feedback and then open up the floor. Dale, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've appreciated all the discussion on this. This was always going to be the area of contention. And I think we knew that, starting this way back, and not something easy that we were all going to be able to agree on. And my hope is just that, yeah, we are focusing on the things that we're going to need to do to get through this, to satisfy the criteria and DWR's needs for the next 5 years, and focus on that. It is a large number, but I think we've got a lot of historical data that supports a lot of these numbers, and yeah, it's a big one to stare at, but I think we're going to need to put this out there, and we're going to get a lot of comment about it in the public comment period, and so look forward to seeing that. But I think we're going to need to go ahead with this as is, and so that we can move this process along.
All right, thank you. Let's at this point now go ahead and go to Terry as a staff representative. Then I'll continue opening the floor for any other staff comment. We'll open the floor for the public. Then I'm going to come back around to the straw polls, and I'm going to treat these as 2 straw polls. I'm going to address the suggestion that Bruce made as one straw poll, and I'm going to assess the willingness to support the overall release tomorrow in context of this as a separate straw poll. So Terry, let's go to you first, and then I'll spell that out a little more detailed. Go ahead.
I wanted to remind everyone that the JPA agreement really has very strong budget provisions. It first discusses that the members of the JPA are Scotts Valley Water District, San Lorenzo Valley Water District, and the County of Santa Cruz. So we have those special members. And then there's a unanimous voting requirement. And let me get to that quickly so people can be comfortable that the unanimous voting requirement under 9.3, the JPA agreement, says any expenditure that's estimated to cost over $50,000 requires a unanimous vote. The annual budget requires a unanimous vote. The GSP for the basin, which is the final document, requires a unanimous vote. The levying of assessments or fees requires a unanimous vote, or the issuance of indebtedness. So I wanted to give people comfort that this is not the end all. This is an estimate. And then the budget, as we get more clarity as we're moving forward, I'm sure will be hammered out very carefully. Thank you.
Okay, in that regard, well, actually, let me first, as we've done in the past, let me go ahead and open up the floor for any public comment at this time, either by raised hand mode or on the phone. And then Eden, I see, is that, I had not lowered your hand, so I don't know whether that was remaining from your prior hand up, or is that a new comment? Oh, okay.
New comment. I just wanted to clarify what Terry said, to clarify that unanimous of the member directors.
Okay, thank you. Rick, go ahead, please. You're muted.
No, I just wanted to say that, you know, the estimates that Perrette and Sierra and others put together in this budget, you know, are good numbers. You know, we do have a lot of experience with stream monitoring. Perrette does have a tremendous amount of experience in a lot of annual reports and so forth. Those numbers are good. It's from San Lorenzo Valley's perspective, it's just the cost in general. And to be sure that whatever we do, you know, we have to do it. I mean, San Lorenzo Valley is going to have to find this money, and it's going to have to come from somewhere within existing existing budgets. You know, we're not going to be able to go out to the ratepayers, you know, and increase the rates to cover these costs. So it's going to take away from other elective type environmental projects that we do that, you know, we feel are necessary. There's going to be some hard decisions from San Lorenzo Valley. We're already at board directive to lower operating costs. We have high operating costs and they're climbing every year. So, you know, I know our board, and I don't speak for our board in general, but these are going to be some tough decisions on where these funds are going to come from. And I think we just want to be sure going into this that we're doing what we need to do, and maybe baby steps into it and don't jump into it all at once. And we can always come back to the agencies and talk about budget increases or additional funds. But committing us to these funds are going to be tough for San Lorenzo Valley. And I don't doubt they're going to be tough for Scotts Valley and for the county. I don't think any of us has extra money sitting around. But we're extremely strapped with CZU fire recovery and different projects that we have in trying to rebuild our system in general. It's an old system. So I just want to say that, you know, we're supportive of moving this ahead, but we've got to watch the pennies. And I expect our board will be doing this all the way through the process. Thank you.
So in that regard, and recognizing that Director McPherson has put forward a a request to get staff working on something that might, in fact, inform both opinions about tonight and literally inform the future budget development rather than just general estimate development. I'm going to go to Director McPherson's suggestion first. And the question I'm going to do, and again, as we've done in the past, to gain board direction, collective board direction to staff. The question is whether board members support, do you support Director McPherson's recommendation for staff to advance as rapidly as possible a game plan for the creation of an ad hoc committee to be acted on as a formal action, a formal creation action at the very next board meeting. So I want to go ahead and touch on that first and go through the list of board members. Again, the question is, do you support Director McPherson's? And you can say, yes, I support, or no, I do not support. And then I'm going to address the actual budget question. So again, in no particular order, Director Dills, do you support Director McPherson's suggestion?
Yes, I do.
Director Mahood, do you support the suggestion?
I'm not sure I do, for two reasons. One is it really appropriate to have representatives of groups who have no obligation to pay be part of this discussion? One of the problems I feel that we've had in this whole process is that much of the process has been driven by staff, by the county and the city of Santa Cruz, but the costs are being imposed largely on San Lorenzo and Scotts Valley. And this is just not something that I think is appropriate, and we can't really live with this going forward. So, you know, it's sort of it's what you're asking me to vote for. You know, if we were to suddenly magically reconstitute the organization, the GSP, where Mount Herman and, you know, the well owners were contributing something and the city of Santa Cruz was contributing something, and we redistributed these in a little bit more equitable way, then I would say, yeah, that's a logical thing to do. But not knowing that that's going to happen, I guess I'll just say no, because I mean, in an ideal world, yes, but in practice, no.
I'm going to interrupt and just say one thing to Gail and suggest to Bruce and suggest to Dave is the composition of that group shouldn't be part of this question. Question is, should we put together an ad hoc committee to look at the budget? If it's just San Lorenzo, Scotts Valley, and the county, so be it. That's fine. But I think people obviously want to drill deeper into the budget or proposed budget or possible budget, or we just don't even bother with any of it and wait till we really have the opportunity to have to approve a budget. That's not what we're doing. So either we can talk about it more between now and then with just the powers that be, people that are paying now, or we just table the whole thing and just move on.
Well, so in the spirit of what Director Perry just said, again, and notwithstanding that Director McPherson put forward some proposed specifics, again, because you cannot take a formal action on any of this tonight, folks, I am merely trying to find a way to move the ball down the field and get board direction to staff to begin the process, to create a staff report, to come forward with options about membership in this approach. So it somewhat mirrors what Chris just said. So what I am looking for is, do you support proceeding with direction to staff to get going on both agendizing and putting together a staff report on how to convene and then conduct a budget ad hoc committee, or by any other name. So at this point in time, we have a no from Dr. Mahood. Let me continue on. Excuse me, Director Brown.
Yes, I support Director McPherson's proposal.
Thank you. Director Angfer.
I support the proposal within the parameters that Chris outlined.
All right. Director McPherson,
Yes, I do.
Director Koopman,
Yes, I do.
Director Pollock.
Yes, I wanted to kind of respond to Gail, and I do appreciate her comment on that. And I just to say, as one of the agencies that's not participating in the funding at this time, I would like to participate in that group, because I just assumed at some point we're all going to be participating in the funding of this in some way or fashion. So that's my thoughts.
All right, thank you. Director Smalley.
I support the staff coming to us with options for an ad hoc group. Yes.
Thank you. Director Perry.
Yes.
Director Cassidy.
Yeah, I support Bruce's suggestion that and that it only include the paying member agency representatives.
All right, Director Stiles.
Support moving forward with a committee. I am concerned about what the staff's workload is given where we are. So I don't necessarily need it next month.
Okay, well, we'll take this again as general direction to staff to begin their work, and they can report back as to how expeditious or not. At this point in time, we have in support 10 votes and against 1 vote. So that will constitute direction by the board to staff to begin the process to build an approach and then come back to the board. Gail, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just guess I want to sort of echo what Ruth said. I really don't want to be put in a position where the staff goes off, comes back and again comes and insists that we make a decision on a quick basis without any chance for discussion. It would be better that if this happens, that it goes in parallel with the timing of the public comment, with the idea that hopefully they would come back at the end of that time with their recommendations. It doesn't have, in my view, I think it would be counterproductive to have it happen, next month or something. I just don't see that working.
All right. Then let the record show that that comment has been provided by a few board members, and other feedback as to the membership has also been provided to staff for staff to consider and then come back to report to board as staff feels is appropriate, both regarding timing and composition. Director Brown, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, based on Director Mahood's comments, that what would come back in a month would be some options for the formation of the committee that would look at the fiscal situation, not any type of solution by that group. That work to explore solutions would run in parallel with the public option or the public input period. Thank you.
That's correct. I think that, yes, that's correct. I'll just leave it at that.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. The record will show that staff has been given that direction and will report back in some form or another. But again, staff will be making no recommendation or no decision. Staff's not emboldened to do that. We are now going to then move on to the other question, which is regarding the 5-year implementation budget as it has been revised. Again, this is a straw poll question. As it has been prepared right now, and with the caveats that Director Koopman indicated, that it would be ideal to be communicating to the public or reiterating to the public that this is draft and it's been prepared by staff and it is for public review. Does the budget as presented to you tonight and as revised, does this budget, are you prepared to oppose the release of the public document because of this budget? Again, I am asking this as an opposition-based question on purpose, because I need to assess on these key topics whether we are going to, at the end of this evening, have a fundamental opposition to the release of the public document, however mercenary that again may seem. So are you opposed, based on this budget, are you opposed to releasing the public draft. And again, so your answer should be I'm opposed or I'm not opposed. Again, this is not a binding. This is merely a straw poll. You just need to get a sense. Okay, Director Cassidy.
Not opposed.
Thank you. Director Koopman.
Not opposed.
Thank you. Director Angfer.
Mindful that no means yes, I'm not opposed.
Understood. Director Brown.
Not opposed.
Thank you. Director Stiles.
Not opposed.
Director. Okay. Thank you. Director Mahood.
I will oppose it.
Okay. Thank you. Director McPherson.
Not opposed.
Thank you. Director Pollock.
Not opposed.
Thank you. Director Smalley.
Not opposed.
Thank you. Director Perry.
Not opposed.
Thank you. Director Dills.
Not opposed.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, this time we're going to move on to the third item, which is the addressing items. Actually, Director Brown, did you have another comment? I was starting to have my nose buried in my notebook. Was that still your prior hand up?
No, I apologize, prior hand.
Okay, I can lower it. Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Okay, at this time, Georgina, if you could advance the slides to the third primary focus item. And again, just a reminder to everybody, we're just dealing with these three items first. We'll then go back to beginning chapters and then work our way through all the chapters to see if there are any other items that need to be addressed before we call the question. So to reiterate, this is the feedback that has been provided by a private pumper representative. This is the way it has been addressed thus far. And now there is if you could move on to the next slide, Georgina, which would be that same language with the additional, it is important that private users be engaged in this process. So I'm opening up the floor again for just general discussion. I do want people cognizant of time this evening. We still have quite a bit to do. So I'm going to open the floor for general questions, comments, and then we're going to eventually move on to the same straw poll exercise. At this time, any comments by board members? All right, seeing none and hearing none, I'm going to, go ahead, Director Cassidy.
I was just going to ask Georgina if she wouldn't mind just giving a little clarity on why she would change need to important for engagement of private users.
What I changed and what you gave initially, I think you said would need to be involved, and I thought I would change it to that be engaged. So I don't know. I was trying to make it that it would be you have to do this, and so I was trying to be more instead of would need to be. I don't know. I was trying to cut down on those words a little bit. So I wasn't trying to make it something that is optional, but maybe I failed at that.
Okay, you're accepting that edit, Director Cassidy, since it was on your language. Okay, essentially you're making it a bit more active voice.
Yes.
Okay. All right, seeing no other board member hands raised, I'm going to move us directly into opening the floor for public comment and staff comments. So are there any members of the public that choose to comment at this time? If so, please use your raise hand mode and or *9 if you're on the phone. And then also seeing none other than staff, Brett, go ahead, please.
We do have one member of the public, Cynthia. You should be unmuted.
Yes, in my experience, the word shall be engaged indicates that they must be, and it is a requirement rather than just a possibility. So I would comment on that. You did not ask for public comments on the last part of the discussion. May I make a comment?
Yes, I am terribly sorry. I should have done that. My apologies. Please, by all means, go ahead and make comment on the prior items.
My question is, will showing the expenses as SMGA expenses make it easier to get grants? Are these expenses the district's expenses that the districts are already paying, just not attributed to SMGA. In other words, as Perrette indicated, they may have been hidden in the Scotts Valley Water District budget, but not attributed explicitly to SMGA. Are these, like Sierra said, the county and SLV Water District, and I guess Scotts Valley Water District are already doing monitoring? Are we just reassigning these costs to SMGA? Or are they really new costs, new expenses? Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let's go ahead and deal with that question first, and then we'll come back to your proposal for an edit. Perrette and Sierra, I'm going to look to you all first, both as people most actively involved in the modification of the budget, and you as key staff, and in particular Sierra, I think have been very active in grant writing in most recent past.
Yeah, great question, Cynthia. Some of that is true to what you said, that putting them all in under one umbrella and showing the regional benefits often do help in being able to apply for grants and receive them. Some of those expenses are occurring now, but there is a large burden from the new act, the new law, that we all have to somehow figure out how we're going to pay for that and who is going to pay for that. So it's a combination, it's a mixed bag, but good points.
Sierra, anything else you'd like to respond to on that?
No, unless there's a follow-up clarification question, but I think she pretty much got it.
Okay. While we are on that, and again, with exceptionally large apologies that I failed to open up the floor for public comment to the prior votes, are there any other public members that wish to speak at this time to the prior straw polls that were taken? Any other public members wish to at this time? And again, my apologies both to the board and to members of the public that I on my oversight. Perrette, I see your hand up again, so go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm actually seeing that we have Frank Cheap, and I was prepared to speak on his behalf because he said before the meeting that he has a conflict. And if Frank, if my eyes don't, they're not wrong. And if you would like to actually pass your comments or say your comments yourself, otherwise I'm going to be reading your comments, written comments.
Hey, Perrette, thank you very much. I'm actually in a pretty noisy environment right now, so if I might ask you just to read the comments so they get entered into the record, I would most appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. I will do so.
Thank you.
So yeah, I got those the following two comments from Frank Cheap, who has been very active participant in our meetings. So the first one is support the added language all over several sections of the draft GSP to make it clear that the minimus user will not be metered. There needs to be more wording that protects the minimus users from fees, taxes without corresponding cost of directly beneficial management actions, unless they are engaged first in a process wherein they have a saying or on paying those additional costs. So that was the first comment. And the second one is, I would also like to see protection for the private well owners as it relates to groundwater sustainability management of the Santa Margarita Aquifer, which primarily will affect private well owners versus the larger water districts. And thank you, the board, for consideration.
All right, thank you very much, Perrette, and more importantly, thank you very much, Frank, for submitting those comments. Moving our attention back to the proposal at hand and the language. Eden, as the originator of these additional comments, notwithstanding prior edits that Georgina had made, would you be comfortable with Cynthia's proposal? And I'm going to propose to you that would grammatically, it would make that last sentence simply say, private users shall be engaged in this process. So Eden Cassidy, I'm going to look to you since you've been the advocate for these. What is your opinion of making that modification?
My opinion is that my original wording was clunky and Georgina improved it and Cynthia has improved it further. That sounds great.
Okay. So I'm going to, yes, let me go to Jack. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I have a logic question. I like where Cynthia is coming from. But we can't, to me, engagement is a two-party conversation. And I don't know how we shall engage private users. I know we have some private users on the board, so presumably they would be involved. But I'm more comfortable with something like the agency shall make every effort to engage private users. We can say that about ourselves, that we shall make the effort to engage others. But I have a problem with us saying that together we're all going to be engaged, because it's a two-way street.
Okay, Georgina, somehow we've lost your screen. There we go. Yeah, okay, thank you. So again, grammatically, what Jack's friendly amendment on this would be is that last sentence would say the SMGWA shall make every effort to engage private users in this process.
Yes.
And I think that should say private users. Thank you. And then if you could, there, thank you. And then we'll strike that other. Okay. Doug, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I guess traveling down the same road as Jack, I guess in practice, does this really mean anything more than making sure that the private well owner board members attend the meetings where this stuff happens? Or are we supposed to go through a whole nother outreach program on anything like this? I'm just curious what we're setting ourselves up for. We have private well owners on the board. They're going to be part of the decision process. Isn't that enough?
Director Cassidy, do you wish to, or Director Koopman, do you wish to respond to that? Well, I'll let the two of you respond to that.
Sure. I mean, the question of, isn't it enough? If it was enough, I wouldn't have suggested it be in there, Doug. And as far as Jack's suggestion to add that at the start, I'll give you a quick preface. I'm an insurance broker, and insurance companies always promise to make all efforts possible to contact the consumer or whatever, but in reality, it doesn't really happen. It fails a lot of the time. So the idea here, in the super simple way that Cynthia had suggested it be boiled down, is that private well owners, whether through their representatives on the board, or if we're no longer involved in the process or somehow have disappeared from it, outreach to some private well owners that are interested in participating in the process. They have to be engaged in signing on knowingly and coming up with the numbers here that they will share the cost of whatever is being proposed that somehow benefits them. So the real simple way to say it that Cynthia suggested is, we'll do it, not we'll make an effort to do it.
Okay. Director Dills, notwithstanding the logic cycle that you referred to, and Director Engfer, your concerns as well, we have a lot to do tonight still. So I need for us to be applying a certain level of triage, if we could, please, be very blunt. So what I want to know is, Director Cassidy had put forward some original language. Members of the public had provided an alternative to that. Director Dills, are you fundamentally opposed to using the prior language? Not, your concerns about logic stream notwithstanding, and Director Engfer the same.
If you, by prior language, you mean the language that Cynthia added?
Yes, private users shall be engaged in this process.
I could live with it.
Okay. Director Angfer, notwithstanding your concerns about what the implications of that means, can you live with that?
I certainly can.
Okay. So with that said, I'm going to ask Regina to go ahead and strike the new language. We're going to come back to the old language or revised old language. So that would therefore be the very modification that would be made in advance of the documents going out or being available tomorrow for the public review, if that in fact happens. So my question then to board members at this time is, will anyone be opposed? If assuming this language were included, would anybody be opposed to releasing the public draft tomorrow with this language? So again, it is an opposition-based question. I know that's reverse logic, but at this point in time, I just want to check from an opposition perspective. Is anybody opposed to releasing the public draft with this additional language? So you're either going to say, no, I'm not opposed, or I'm opposed. Director Dills?
Not opposed.
Okay. Director Smalley?
Not opposed.
Director Perry?
I am not opposed, and I do not think we'll have any trouble getting private users engaged in the process the day we say we're going to regulate and charge you.
Okay,
I'm not worried. I am not worried about that.
editorializing notwithstanding. Director Angfer?
Not opposed.
Thank you. Director Cassidy?
Not opposed, and I think Director Perry is hilarious.
Director Koopman?
Not opposed.
Thank you. Director Pollock?
Not opposed.
Thank you. Director Mahood? You may be muted, Director Mahood. You're still muted. I'll come back to you. Director Stiles?
Not opposed, and a vote for comedy of the night for Director Perry.
Director Brown?
Not opposed.
Director McPherson?
Not opposed.
And Director Mahood, I'm coming back to you.
I'm not opposed.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, so with this additional language, it would indicate that no board member would be opposed of releasing the public draft at this time. Thank you very much. Okay, so with that exercise being completed, that has now touched on the primary items that staff, that the consultant had made the decision to focus on as an aspect of the staff report, and obviously key discussion tonight thus far. With that, we are now going to bring ourselves basically back to the top of the GSP. We're not going to literally scroll at this time through the GSP, but if there are comments that are made, we are going to have to go into the GSP and essentially pull up those pages. So I have previously requested of Georgina to make sure that she's going to have that at the ready so we can do that. So what that's going to require of you as board members, as we now move forward to close the rest of the discussion, excuse me, is that as I go section by section, if there is an item that you wish to have discussed further, and that in particular, at this point in time, it really needs to be an item that in your mind is prohibitive of you supporting the public release of the document. Does not mean that you agree 100% with the document. That's completely understood. Again, hearkening back to my introductory comments and the comments by Georgina, we are about to enter into a 60-day review stage. That includes both the public and yourselves as board members, at which point in time, staff and the board will be working thereafter on the comments. You will be revisiting this document, and as was indicated by Terry, ultimately the GSP must meet a unanimous vote by the voting members of the GSP. So we still have several iterations to go through for this document to ultimately go out the door with a full ratification. So I am unabashedly putting upon you to triage or to assess your comments, that at this point in time, what I'm asking you to do is on a section by section basis, if there are any items that you wish to raise that absent being addressed would compel you to be opposed to approving the public release of this document. That's what's on the table. Not big generic or general comments, but just if we don't address it, you have a problem with it and you would feel compelled to oppose the public release. With that caveat, we're going to start with the executive summary. I'm going to open the floor there. Like I said, I'm going to go through. I'm going to try to do this pretty quickly. Are there any board members that would like to raise any items that they feel need to be addressed, that they are opposed to in the executive summary of the current version of the GSP? Okay, hearing none and seeing none. Moving on then to section 1, the introduction of the current GSP. Are there any items of the current section 1 that any board members feel opposed to? All right, moving on to section 2, plan and basin setting. Are there any portions of the plan and basin setting section that you would like to address, that you are opposed to? All right, moving on to section 3, sustainable management criteria. Are there any sections of section 3 that a board member feels opposed to at this time regarding release to the public draft? Gail, go ahead.
I'm fine with the sustainable management criteria, but as I said in my previous remarks, I think the discussion of the monitoring network, and I've made these comments on the drafts, but they've never been responded to, is that they are not always scientific and they create the impression that we're in a desperate state that we are not. And so this is linked to my objection to the cost.
Understood. Thank you. Are there any other comments in addition to things that have already been raised tonight on section 3 that would prohibit a board member from, or would compel a board member to oppose public release? All right, thank you. Section 4, projects and management actions. Are there any items that any board members feel compelled to oppose? Gail, go ahead. I think that's a new hand. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Rick, Rogers, and Carly and I have repeatedly tried to correct an error of fact in section 4 concerning the discussions with Santa Cruz, City of Santa Cruz, about purchase or not a purchase of water, and also their editorializing about whether it's the upgrade of the Kirby plant is too expensive. So in other words, there's editorializing about that in a way that there's no editorializing anywhere else in the document about cost. And in the latest version, after I complained about it, instead of changing it, they actually doubled down and increased it. And these are in part statements of fact, and I won't, I sent an extended email last night with copies to Perrette and Chris Perry. And so, you know, I haven't, there it is, but I didn't get any response, and there has to be a response to this, because according to our district council, it's dangerous for us to have misinformation in such a foundational document, because these things tend to get promulgated.
Okay, so as you can see, there had been preparation in deference to all board members. Hopefully you understand procedurally, I was going through, the expectation was you were going to respond to this item. And so Georgina, at this time, I'm going to go to you, because obviously there was a slide to hopefully address the concerns that have been raised by San Lorenzo. So Georgina, do you want to go ahead and, excuse me, go through the existing language and what the proposed replacement is?
Yeah, no, I have, if this is the right facts, I have no problem changing this. There was no ulterior motive to this, you know, we're not singling anyone out, and this is fine. I'm okay with this being rewritten this way. And this, you know, that some of that text that we got in the existing and the top paragraph actually came from district staff. So I thought that we were good there, but I'm okay changing it. It's not a big deal. It's a big deal to you that it was wrong, but it's not a big deal to me to change it to what you've written here. And I would, you know, that's just my opinion. I'm sure the directors are going to say something too, but perhaps Director Mahood, you could explain what the difference is between these two paragraphs to make it clear.
You know, I kind of feel like this is really down in the weeds, and I'd hope that we could resolve this without, you know, like you said, this first one is just a statement of fact of the negotiations between and the timing of between the city of Santa Cruz about water and us, and the timing of some discussions and other things. And so I think it's just a statement of fact. The second issue, which is there's another set, you know, here, this is just to get rid of the editorializing about whether you think it's a good idea to, or somebody thinks it's a good idea to upgrade the Kirby water treatment plant as opposed to us buying treated water from city of Santa Cruz. And all I'm trying to do is put this on that whole discussion of conjunctive use and us using Loch Lomond water and how we do it on the same footing that we've had all the other projects, almost all of which are more expensive up front and more expensive in terms of operating and maintenance, you know, ongoing costs. So I just don't want this one picked on when ones that are much more expensive in terms of implementation have no comment at all.
So if we could, let's go back to the prior slide. I want to do this sequentially so that board members have a chance to, because all of the board members are seeing this for the first time because of, well, they're just seeing it for the first time. So can you please go to the prior slide?
Yeah. Sorry, just in response to Gail, again, I have no problem changing this either.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I would say that I'm not sure that I don't think this is worth the board members' time. And really, having read the comment logs, there are very few of the board members have obviously read these in the kind of detail that I have. So I don't think we're making a change here that's going to really, cause a bunch of other board members to get all excited. I guess I would just check with Mark if he's happy with it. And as long as Georgina is happy with it and Rick Rogers is happy, and Perrette saw it and Chris Perry, I think we can just.
No, Gail, procedurally, we can't do it that way. I'm sorry, but the document is a document that the board has all seen. The board is about to release the document or not release the document. All board members are an equivalent standing and being able to weigh in and pose their opinion. I have to allow all board members, therefore all board members need to be duly informed, as does the public. So I appreciate what you're saying, but procedurally, I can't do it that way.
Okay.
Okay, so I see Director Smalley with your hand up, and then I want to make sure that there is a opportunity for all board members to, as we're going through this right now, to be able to read the existing and the proposed and see if there's any concern about the proposed language. Director Smalley and Director Menard, I see your hand up, or excuse me, Rosemary Menard, I see your hand up. I'm going to, as with prior times, I'm going to attempt to exhaust any comments by board members first, and then I'll come to staff. Director Smalley, go ahead, please. You're muted right now, Mark.
Excuse me. The changes that Director Mahood has made are important to San Lorenzo Valley Water District, and we believe correctly reflect the current state of conditions between the city and San Lorenzo Valley Water District. So yes, I think it's important to make these changes and reflect what we believe is the current state of conditions out there. I've seen in other documents misinformation being carried forward to another document about aspects of what our water district has either said in the past or done in the past. And I don't want that misinformation continued to be propagated from this document to something else. So yes, I'm in favor of making these changes.
Right. So I think we're in violent agreement. Well, I'm just making sure is that
yes,
all the other board members are being given an opportunity to look at the proposed language and either honor the request that you are making and for the reasons you're making it, or to ask questions or do something else wise. So at this time, what I want to ask board members to do, if you've not done so already, is please, let's just kind of pause. We're going to have some quiet time. And I want board members to be able to read the existing and read the proposed for this paragraph, and then we'll move on to the exact same exercise for the other. I'll give you all a couple minutes, or a minute, and then I'll see if there's any questions on the proposed replacement by board members. And Rosemary, I will come to you shortly. Okay, Jack, I'm going to come to you, and then I'm going to see if there are any other board members that have any questions or comments. Jack, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand this, just this page. But the first paragraph basically says, ends with the SLVWD has not yet exercised either allowance. And the second paragraph, the proposed paragraph, says that there was no agreement. So I just wanted to be clear whether or not there is an agreement, because you can't exercise an allowance if you don't have an agreement in my mind. So is that part of why the proposed replacement language was made? Is there no actual agreement?
That is correct.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other board member questions or comments about this text, and in particular, any board members who would feel opposed to this text? Chris, I know you may not be opposed. Go ahead, Chris.
There is an agreement about the 313 acre feet of water, though.
That is not an agreement, Chris. That is a contractual thing, which this.
No, I get it. And that's a contractual agreement. It was adjudicated, if I remember the history correct.
Yeah, yes, I should just, this is why this is so hard to do here. There's a whole previous part of this paragraph that goes through all of that.
Yeah.
And talks about that sort of thing. And it's not really an agreement. It was basically, a judge declared that this is what it is. And so all I'm correcting was the misimpression that at some point there were negotiations about us buying purified water from City of Santa Cruz. That's all I'm not trying to dispute anything about, our water rights or anything else. And maybe I should have included all of the other stuff that precedes this, but I was just trying to make it short.
I just wanted to be clear for Jack.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right.
Thank you.
All right, let me at this time go ahead and go to Rosemary, please.
Thanks very much. So I don't have a problem with the replacement language. I would comment just for, the reality that the whole conversation is all about what happened more than a decade ago, which seems to me to be kind of silly to include at this level, but nevertheless, that's what you all want, then that can be in there. My hand was originally up so that I could see what's on the next page, so that I could make sure that I feel equally sanguine about it.
Did you say equally sanguine? Is that what you said?
Sanguine.
Man, okay. Rosemary wins the $6 word award tonight.
I agree with you, Rosemary. I would just say that rather than try to get into a discussion about whether it should be there, I just tried to fix it. But
nope, that's again, we're in violent agreement. I'm just dealing with one slide at a time, gang. Okay, I don't have the powers of metaphysical capabilities to have us look at two slides at the same time. Okay, let us now proceed on to the other slide, Georgina, please. Okay.
There's a lot more to this one.
Yes, there is. So let's go ahead and just give everybody some quiet time to take a look at the existing and take a look at the proposed. Okay, let me go ahead and open up the floor for people to get into the queue just by using the raise hand mode while others are maybe still finishing reading. Are there any comments or questions from board members about this proposed replacement and or opposition to the proposed replacement? Okay, Rosemary, pause for just a minute. I just want to double check. Are there any board members wish to get into the queue or wish to let me give them more time? Okay, Director Brown, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm doing my best to read between the lines about the differences here. I think it would be helpful if Director Mahood would once again articulate what she determines to be the important difference here.
Sure.
The difference is that there are discussions here about the relative costs of things and whether it's worth it. And I'm just trying to eliminate those because in nowhere else in the document do we have in the text any editorializing about whether something's worth doing or not. And you know, even for example, when I made comments about in my comments on chapter 4 or section 4 about the costs of some of the more expensive programs, the person who was editing responded to me saying, well, the GSB is designed for us just to give alternatives, not to talk about their relative costs or cost effectiveness. And so I'm not making the changes you suggest. And so my response is, okay, I accept that. If that's the standard, then all I want is you just apply that to this little section of the text. So that's what I'm trying to do. I just don't want to basically make it sound like somebody has made a judgment on one of the components that we're talking about or potential components that's an easy fix to us dealing with potential climate change issues, because using the Loch Lomond water is, as we've modeled everything, is essential to the sort of the simple projects, the what do we call them, tier 2 projects that we've talked about. And so I don't want one of them dismissed in the text.
All right, thank you. Chris, go ahead, please.
I totally agree with Gail. I thought when I read this for the first time, the original way back, I thought, really funny that they shot that down, because I thought that was a good idea. But just so everyone is clear, no one thinks this is some sort of conspiracy. That language came from SLV staff. So it was staff at SLV that was feeling like, we don't want to spend that money. And that, you know, and it could have been the board at the time. This could be historic language.
Well, it may be historic language from.
And I'm for changing. I'm 100% for changing.
Yeah, okay.
I don't want anyone to think that.
All right. So let's not dispute who's at fault. Let's just.
No, it's not a matter of being at fault.
Okay.
I mean, when
Okay.
someone else is shoving misinformation, you know, and I hate the use of that term in this context, but you know, I just don't want it to look like there's a conspiracy of people outside that were trying to shoot down this project. And I don't think it should be shut down. I like it.
Okay, so are there any other board members that wish to weigh in at this time, either with further questions or to express that the language as proposed would lead them to oppose release of the public draft? And then I will go to Rosemary and open the floor for staff and public. Any further comments by board members? All right, hearing none and seeing none. Rosemary, go ahead, please.
The comment I would make, I don't have any problem with the replacement language. I would just make the following comment. In certain ways, the replacement language is guilty of the same thing that was going on in the previous language, which is it's rejecting out of hand the idea of treated water as the source because of all these things that have to be built. And I would just say that the one thing that's not here that in the replacement language that may be relevant and maybe somebody would want to include is that if you do a treatment plant upgrade, that's on you. If you take treated water from us, we might want to bring treated water up into that basin, in which case the project that would have to get done would have a partner. That's all.
Okay.
I guess I would say that I would take Rosemary's comment as a friendly amendment to maybe be adjusted during the comment period. I don't object to what she's saying, but I guess I would just like to settle this for tonight in terms of what goes out to the public.
It's fine. The point I'm just making is that, you know, again, I think that sometimes when you talk about something that involves more than one party, it's not just a one-way thing. And so we should be thinking, and it's fine to me to change it later. It doesn't have to be changed now, but it's a lost opportunity to think about how you might have a partner for what has to get done to get that water to you. And then you wouldn't have to pay what's probably not anywhere close to 6.4 million for the treatment plant, the Kirby treatment plant upgrade at this point.
Okay, so we have proposed friendly amendment that could be considered at a later date. We have Gail as the originator of these comments, acknowledging that she would not be opposed to that, but also at a later date for purposes of simplicity and frankly, probably getting things completed tonight. So at this time, I want to go ahead and double check with board members. Any other board members or any board members opposed to the inclusion of the proposed replacement language? Any board members opposed to that? Okay, and likewise, Georgina, could you please go to the prior slide? And I just want to ground truth that again, and then I'm going to go ahead to the public and just see if there's any public comment on this, since this has had pronounced discussion by the board. Again, any board members opposed to the proposed replacement language here on this slide? Okay, let me go ahead and open up the floor for any further public comment or staff comment. Excuse me. Any comments at this time?
We do have a public comment. Cynthia has a hand up.
Go ahead,
Cynthia.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
Thank you. Yes, I really appreciate Gail's comments and Rosemary's as well. And I believe there may be other reasons for San Lorenzo Valley to be interested in upgrading or building a new water treatment plant. And I think that the two districts should cooperate, since the city of Santa Cruz is planning to do a lot of work in our area. And maybe there is a better way for us to cooperate during all those future projects, whether through the Santa Margarita or as individual water districts. I think collaboration is the reason we have this agency. And I would like to encourage all of the districts to be as forthcoming as possible about their plans for future projects in the areas of other districts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. I do not see any other attendees' hands up, Correct. So I believe that exhausts public comment. All right, very good. Okay, so then recognizing that we have these pieces of language and that no board members reflected opposition to the replacements, we're going to assume that by extension, no board members would be opposed to public release should these revised pieces of text be included. So with that, I'm going to ask Georgina to bring, thank you. So that's going to bring us on to section 5, I believe, which is the GSP implementation section. And the same question.
Wait, Dave, is there anyone else had questions on anything to bring up on section 4? Because
I'm sorry, I'd assumed not, but no other hands had gone up, but thank you. So let's go back to section 4. Were there any other comments by board members or any other aspects of section 4 that as currently stands would lead you to be opposed to releasing the document as public draft? Okay. Now let's then move on to section 5. Same question. Are there any aspects of section 5 that would lead a board member to be opposed to releasing this document for public review and that you would like to be discussed this evening? Gail, go ahead, please.
My objection is the table that is the quote budget, and
okay,
so the rest of it is fine.
Right. Okay. And so that will, I appreciate you for reiterating that, and that was a presumption from the prior. That's why I had done the prior. But no, I'm glad you reiterated from the prior straw poll. Okay. Okay. At this time, then, Georgina, if you can close your presentation, and Perrette, if you can pull my presentation back up, which has a slide with a proposed language for a motion.
Oh.
If you go to the very last slide. There we go. Okay, I'm going to ask Perrette, since you have this open in an editable form, give me just 1 second. I'm going to ask that at the end of that statement, just can you type the following before the period, with edits addressed and agreed on during the board's July 22nd meeting. Now I gotta take a look at that and see if grammatically that's gonna work. Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency Board approves the July 23rd, 2021 release of the Santa Margarita Groundwater Basin Draft Groundwater Sustainability Plan for a 60-day public review period with edits addressed and agreed on during the board's July 22nd meeting. It's not Faulkner, but it'll probably work. Okay, so with the conversations that we've had this evening, with the edits as proposed by and generally agreed to by virtue of not being opposed to it, in section 5 for addressing the public engagement or engagement with private pumpers, and with the language that we just discussed in section 4 as being an outcome of tonight's meeting, and therefore to be included in the revised document that would then be released tomorrow. And having gone through the 3 focus areas that we've talked about and gone through, and having gone subsequently through all of the sections, section by section or chapters by chapter, to see if there were any other items, I'm going to propose to you all that that this is an actionable motion for you all at this time. So what I want to first see is there any board member revision that you would, that anybody would want to make to the motion? What we're going to do here is I just want to see if there's any revisions that any board members would want to make to the motion. And then we're going to go ahead and open up the floor for public comment. And then we're going to come back to you all. And as I said at the outset, this is going to be a formal vote. This is not a straw poll. This is a formal voice vote that will be, answering to what the motion states, which is either opposed or not. So is there any revisions to the language of the motion? Bruce, go ahead, please.
Well, I just to receive the draft, to receive the draft groundwater sustainability plan, but with the modifications made tonight by various directors. I think we should, and then no public comment period. Do you think that's already been addressed as we have?
Yes, it's already been addressed.
Well, my understanding is it's already been addressed because the group has agreed to the edits that they are willing to agree to as a basis for release tomorrow. So that's why that last phrase.
Okay, good.
All right. Any other questions or comments on the language of the motion? All right, at this time, we're going to go ahead and open up the floor for public comment on this motion before the board takes a formal action. Any public comments at this time?
I do not see any.
Okay, so what we need at this time is a motion to approve and then a second. So is a board member willing to make a motion to approve this?
I move that the Santa Margarita Agency Board approve the July 23rd, 2021 release of the Santa Margarita Groundwater Basin Draft Groundwater Sustainability Plan for a 60-day public review period with edits addressed and agreed on during the board's July 22nd meeting.
God, that was awesome, Ruth. Thank you. Do we have a second, Eden? Eden is a second.
A second.
Record will show that Director Stiles has made a first and Director Cassidy has made a second. At this time, Ms. Harmon?
The roll call, yes. Director Engfrom.
Aye.
Director McPherson.
Aye.
Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Director Koopman.
Aye.
Director Pollock.
Aye.
Director Dillis.
Aye.
Director Mayhood.
Nay.
Director Smalley.
Aye.
Director Stiles.
Aye.
Director Brown.
Aye.
Chair Perry.
Aye.
I have 10 ayes and 1 nay.
The motion passes. Your groundwater sustainability plan will be released for a 60-day public review period tomorrow. Congratulations.
Thank you, everybody. Thank
With
you,
that,
Georgina.
Yes, thank you, Georgina. With that, I'm going to hand items back over to Director Perry.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, here we are now. 3.2, treasurer and auditor appointment. We're going to recommend, everyone knows what's on, I don't have to read it out loud. We lost our treasurer. There's no time to have San Lorenzo Valley get another treasurer before we have to have a treasurer in the short term. So for now, the most qualified person would be Nicholas Kearns, is the finance and customer service manager here in Scotts Valley. I think it was the board's wish that, you know, someone from each agency was handling tasks. And I would think in the future, when San Lorenzo Valley has a finance person that is up to speed on their job at the Valley, that will make this change. But for now, we have the recommendation to appoint Nick Kearns. Is there any discussion from the group?
Director Perry, there is a second component. I found it reading the bylaws that the most recent amendment states that the role of an auditor also moves with the treasurer, just to simplify check signing and internal controls. So according to our bylaws, the board should also appoint, at least for the time being, a new auditor.
Okay.
And I believe it can be done in one motion.
Discussion about that. No comment. Okay, well, then do I hear anything from the public regarding this?
I see no hands.
Okay, then do I have a motion?
So moved.
This is Engfer, I second.
Okay.
Who did we have the first? I'm sorry.
Was
Director Brown.
Okay, sorry, Miriam. Okay, and Angfer is the second.
Got it.
Okay,
So we'll do a roll call. We'll go McPherson.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye. Aye.
Koopman.
Aye.
Pollock.
Aye.
Dillis.
Aye.
Mayhood.
Aye.
Smalley.
Aye.
Stiles.
Aye.
Angfer.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
And Chair Perry.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, staff report, New Sigma website status.
So I think I'm going to take it just to kind of get you oriented. It was the first day this afternoon that we went live on the new website. So it does have new bells and whistles. I encourage all of you to go and check it out and let us know, because as with anything new, with any transition, I'm sure this smart group of people will find find things that we can improve on. And the best feature, the new feature that the staff is really excited about, that the website allows us to collect public comment to the GSP and tabulate it. So hopefully a little bit less manual work for us and more transparency as we're tracking the comments. So that's kind of the main thing. Please use that as a tool as you are talking to your constituents, how to submit comments. That is a preferred way. We do take just the old-fashioned on letter written communications, but it is preferable to funnel all of that through the website. And that's Miller Maxfield was behind the scenes making it work. We worked a very tight timeline, and the goal was to get it up by the date when the public comment opens. So mission accomplished.
Well, I just pulled it up, and beautiful pictures and fascinating use of contour lines. Very
catching.
Yeah, very good. Okay, any comment on that from anybody?
Looking for hands, and I see none.
Okay, so we have the big event coming up. Do you want to say anything, Perrette? I'm depressed.
I believe we do have Kelly too. Kelly, our intern, Kelly Krotkov, has been instrumental along with Dave Seppos and Jennifer from Miller Maxfield. Sarah has helped with some content, and we pulled in pretty much every staff member. So we, at this point, the postcards have gone out. I actually received, I think maybe some of you directors get your mail here, because I received a whole handful to the residents of this at this address. So our Basin residents should have a wonderful postcards directing them. We would love for everybody to register on Eventbrite, but it's not a must. People can just come, and we take walk-ins. So it is in 2 weeks on Saturday, July 31st. We're gonna make it fun. We're gonna make it informational, educational. A handful of directors have signed up to volunteer. It's going to be all staff, all hands on board. Dave Seppos is going to be there. Georgina won't be able to come, but another staff member from Montgomery is going to be participating. So hopefully we get a lot of attention, a lot of participation, and can share all of the good work that this agency has been doing.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, next is the financial report for the period of April 1st to June 30th. Does everyone questions, thoughts on that? Anything? Comments from the public?
I don't see any comments, but if I may, on the administrative update, there's one thing that Rick Rogers and we wanted to bring to your attention, that we had to invoice the member agencies one more time in July. It did fall into the fiscal year 2022. The treasurer, still the treasurer, Stephanie, notified me of the low cash flow balance. And again, it's just the timing. It is projected to be reimbursed at a later date this fiscal year. But just for your awareness, I think collectively it was I want to say 140,000 between the three member agencies. And as Gail and Mark and the others very appropriately pointed out earlier, it is been quite a burden on the member agencies the last 4 or 5 years to get this work done. So it was 84. I know we paid 84,000. So I'm assuming there was 32,000 from San Lorenzo, and then the 10% from county. Just full disclosure.
Okay, thank you, Perrette. And back to the financial report. Any questions on that? If there are none, I'm going to move to individual director reports. Jack Dillis.
Yes, Chris. Yes, I need to report and want to report that I went to the GSA Summit in June, on June 9th. And so I need to report on that. And I just list a few things that were highlights for me, some of which I knew, but not all of which I did know. We heard about challenges and opportunities, of course, for sustainability plans. We heard about community outreach and engagement and the fact that we're not past that part, but it's a long range need to continue our engagement. And we were talking about engagement tonight, of course. And Dave Sepos was the moderator. He did a good job, of course. We heard guidance from regulatory agencies, DWR and the State Water Resources Control Board. And they talked about state intervention is optional. So we're not going to ever need it, but if we did, they may or may not step in. Lessons learned, again, where data gaps exist, be conservative. Plans can be approved, deemed incomplete, or deemed inadequate and denied, and now we've heard about that. A third of the plans submitted did not include climate change impacts. That surprised me. Half of the plans submitted did not provide for more than one climate change scenario. Half of the plans submitted and reviewed were accepted. There may be, I don't know if it's still there, $300 million available in the state budget for plan implementation, the new budget. The need to stay flexible and adaptive over time. I know we've been hearing that word adaptive. And complex water rights battles are playing out across the state. We don't seem to have too much of that here, but that's a real issue a lot of places, and examples were given. And the importance of water quality and sustainability plans, that's important. And Sierra talked about that. She was part of the panel. And also I attended the Scotts Valley Farmers Market this weekend and manned the booth along with Perrette and Ruth and of course, Kelly. That's my report.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, anyone else? Okay, so we have number 6, future items. Number 7, informational items. No.
Hey, Chris, Ruth's got her hand up. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
It's just minor. Oops.
No, sorry, that's it. You forfeit. Uh-oh. Okay, yes, she did forfeit. All right, we're moving on to items of interest. There are no items of interest, so forget about it. Written correspondence, there are none. And the events calendar, and I'm at number 9.
Chris, I know you were interested. I'm sorry, that CSDA and LAFCO workshop. I know you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Excited about that.
I am doing that. I would encourage all people here, besides being on this board, especially if you're on an elected board, you should definitely sign up for that California Special District and LAFCO. LAFCO is paying for it. It's going to be very educational. and give you a whole idea what special districts are about, and might be, so I know I've done small things like this, and it was very instructional when I was first starting out. So I recommend it to all people in special districts on the board. Okay, thank you. And to number 9.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, Eden, you're always the first on that. Thank you, everybody. That was a heavy lift, and we're gonna have to really knuckle down to get this thing done and get us not have the state come in here and manage this for us. If we don't complete this and get it across the finish line, that's what's gonna happen. So I hope we all really understand the stakes, and we just have to cooperate and get it done. No one's gonna get, everyone's not gonna get everything they want, but I don't think failure is an option. So with that, thank you, everybody, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Stay safe
you.
out there.
Night.
Thanks.
Bye.